Chapter 148. On the surface, they were ordinary adventurers, but in reality, they were a team of benevolent forces coordinated by the Harpist Alliance. Of course, it wasn't because of the request from the spice merchant, Moore. They had always treated it as a joke. Moore's scattered Forest Tower Guild and the Harpist Alliance were mortal enemies. The only reason they didn't stab Moore the moment they met was because of the Harpist Alliance's low profile. The reason they were troubled was because of Chunong. The target of this mission seemed to have disappeared. It had been a long time since they had been able to get any information about the target. It was as if he had disappeared from this world. The slums were changing day by day. The Harpist's long list of names was filled with the stench of blood. The Skinner, the Butcher, and the Blood Eye were all lowly and troublesome characters. Even the Harpist would find it difficult to deal with them. It wasn't because of the big shots, but because of the complicated forces behind them. These people who took on the roles of brokers, stewards, low-level priests, and serve as the middlemen who controlled the lower levels of society in Deepwater City. They might not have great strength or influence, but they were troublesome enough because they were part of the order of this city. The leader of the adventurer team, Elwin, looked at the 11-inch-long name list in his hand with an indescribably ugly expression. Behind the densely packed names were the corpses of the Skinner and the Butcher. The bartender, Lime, wiped the mug in his hand absent-mindedly, but his eyes never left the entrance of the tavern. His thick knuckles moved inch by inch across the surface of the mug. The muscles under his linen clothes relaxed. There was no doubt that his hands could snap the neck of a 12-foot-tall ogre in the blink of an eye. The Harpist Alliance doesn't need to waste so much effort on him. Lime was well aware of the results of his work. The whole city knows about it. He won't live until Midsummer Night. No one can walk out of this city alive after offending so many people. Although he spoke casually, Irwin's expression didn't relax for a moment. Instead, he stared at the table thoughtfully. The Harpist Alliance's principle: you can choose not to participate, but you can't not understand. We need to determine his position. Only then can we decide our attitude. The Harpist Alliance has its own principles. Yes, if it's not a crime, don't judge. I can recite it with my eyes closed. If it is not a crime, do not judge. The actions of the Harpist do not originate from benefits, but from our standpoint and principles. Therefore, the attitude and standpoint of the target is very important to us because it determines our standpoint and actions. Elwin looked serious. Regarding the bloody hand, you have provided too little information. He had no background, no identity, no profession, and no faction. He was like a ghost that had appeared out of nowhere. Everyone has a past, but he can counter prophecy spells. Lime complained. We've tried divine spells and spells. The spellcasters had not yet been able to get rid of those damned illusions, and the mages of the School of Prophecy had refused to cast any more tests. The only thing they can be sure of is that the other party feels like he has returned home to the ether plane. He's like a fish in water. Illusion. Irwin was confused. Yes, anyone who tries to pry into his fate. They would be troubled by the ether plane, and their vision would be fixed at a certain shallow state of the ether plane. He was deprived of his ability to sense the material plane. Over time, their intelligence would be severely damaged. One mage even fell in love with an otherworldly creature he summoned, a sludge monster called Shay. The Ancient Eye, a sludge monster? Irwin showed a look of disbelief. Lime nodded guiltily. It said that his ether vision was very close to the sludge monster's senses. In the end, he learned to communicate with the sludge monster and gained his own love. You should know that among the sludge monsters, it's a beauty. His mentor, Irwin had not finished her sentence. Lime interrupted her. This is not a bad thing for his mentor. A curse with research value is much more important than an apprentice. Besides, he did not lose the apprentice. There are many weirdos among the mages, so what if there are a few more? You can ask a priest to remove the curse. Owen did not want to talk about the sludge monster anymore. It only made her spine tingle. Lime shook his head regretfully. It's useless. Strictly speaking, it's not a curse. Their vision is not an illusion created by negative energy. It's another level of reality in the world. This reality is hard to shake. It's more like the soul has been contaminated by the essence of the ether plane. In essence, it's similar to the price of a prophecy spell. It can't be removed by divine spells. And I heard that the sludge monsters are great at that. Lime revealed a frank smile. He seems to like it. Asterisk thud. Asterisk a soft sound. Lime tilted his head to look at the arrow that had pierced through his scalp. He wisely kept his mouth shut. He waved at the female ranger in front of him, gesturing for him to shut up. Jessica? Lime means no harm. Owen lectured her helplessly. The female ranger did not appreciate it. She went forward and pulled the arrow out of the wood. It seemed like it took quite a bit of effort. Not everyone could pierce through armor with a light bow. Without a prophecy spell, what do we know? We don't need to infiltrate or spy on what we know now. We can hear more details in the taverns by the roadside. We need more specific information. His faction, his inclination, his profession, his faith. This is what determines our attitude towards him. I think this is more important than how many people he has killed. I said, I know nothing. Lime waved his hand. He could be a wizard proficient in prophecy. He could be a priest favored by the gods. Maybe he's also a warrior, a profession like a rogue. Judging from his bloodthirst, he could be a follower of the Dark Sun. Of course, he could also be Max's. But with the villains he eradicated, he could be a paladin of Ilmater. Human nature is so complicated. A paladin might murder, and a rogue might make a great sacrifice. Unless you use detect evil on him, none of this can be used as a basis for judgment. I can only say that this gentleman cares about the things in his little house far more than he is interested in abuse, domination, and power. If that's the case, Jessica opened her mouth to speak. Don't be so quick to judge. Lime interrupted him. Please respect this complicated world. Don't use the simple and direct judgment of young people like you to define it. My intuition tells me that you're facing an existence that is difficult to determine and explore. As an old man, I can tell you that there's no harm in looking more. But we don't have time. We can't pester everyone for so long. Jessica frowned. The slums are very exclusive to outsiders. The Blood Ant Gang has deep control over the place. It's difficult for us to get close. That's because more than 80% of the young people there are working for the Blood Ant Gang. Their fathers, children, and wives are like the most loyal eyes. It's a closed environment. It's difficult for outsiders to survive there. Lime replied, So, can we do nothing? Jessica objected. Information won't jump into our hands by itself, right? Not necessarily, child. Lime smiled slyly. His fingers moved on the table and finally stopped on a stack of brown papyrus. He handed the inconspicuous items to Alwyn. If you were a little more careful, you'd find this. The profits of the tobacco and the movements of the thieves' union. Alwyn read the complicated code in a low voice. This is the information about the docks. It's about the special tobacco and the thieves' union. It's all daily information. It's not every day. These little things are hiding a big secret. Lime smiled proudly. The price and shipment data of the tobacco. Even though we're missing the most important data, it's not difficult to calculate the profits of the tobacco. Similarly, the mission data of the Thieves' Union can also reflect their internal movements. Alwyn looked at the stack of papyrus with a gloomy face. Even she couldn't help but feel nervous when she saw the string of numbers that represented the profits. She didn't need to look at the things at the back to know that the situation had reached a critical moment. Chapter 149. Magic was the foundation of this world. It made the multiverse appear so colorful. It was enchanting and mysterious. It was the origin of the world, or in other words, magic was the origin of the world. Everything was born from the elements, and it was permeated with the power of magic. It was chaotic, but also orderly. It was rational, but also illogical. The primordial magic was the material that created everything. It was the silent and ignorant consciousness of existence itself. Magic permeated every bit of matter and manifested through any form of energy in the multiverse. This was magic, a system that was completely different from science. Chun Eng's explorations were not only fighting against the endless unknown, but he was also fighting against himself all the time. The logical concept and mode of thinking called science were deeply rooted in his mind. They were incomparably firm and tenacious. This gave him unlimited spirit to explore and research, but also imprisoned his way of thinking. It was true that Chen Ong could deconstruct magic from a scientific point of view. In fact, he was adapting to this world. This world had given him something completely new, and it was rapidly assimilating and merging with his old ways of thinking. Science was a path to the truth, but it did not mean that Chen Ong would fix a relatively rigid thinking mode. This way, the new thinking, new changes, and new ideas of this world were very worth learning and researching. While trying his best to abandon the influence of the old thinking mode, Chen Ong was trying his best to maintain the relative independence of his thinking. Knowledge was priceless, and wisdom was even higher. But the only thing more important than both was imagination. When imagination was imprisoned in the old and rigid thinking mode, it was not inappropriate to call it the twilight of the gods. The twilight of thinking. The weave is a very appropriate name. Primordial magic, or rather, the orderly network woven by primordial magic. It is sensitive and flexible, and it connects the spellcaster and the primordial magic power. I can imagine how many civilizations and individual wisdom, this huge network, is the crystallization of this huge network. A faint white light flashed on the tip of Chen Eng's finger, and it was quickly dyed with a silver-white luster. He used the tip of his finger to draw across the void in front of him, leaving a row of colorful runes. It was full of twisted and messy complexity and eccentricity. This kind of impactful mental power was like a 20G file being stuffed into the brain of the person watching. It was a magic trick from a level 0 cantrip. Many people think that magic is orderly and intelligent. It is elegant art. It is difficult knowledge. But only people like us who are close to the truth can realize that the origin of all things does not have any attributes. Chaos and order, evil and good meant nothing to it. Because this is something that intelligent beings have imposed upon this world. And magic already existed before this. Chen Ong sat on the right side of the table in a relaxed manner, as if he was greeting an old friend. There was no one on his left. An unfamiliar voice came from the left side of the table. It was a very low laugh, as if it was muffled in the throat. Before that, magic did not exist. It was us who defined it. Weave chaotic and violent primordial magic power into docile magic power? He was right. This is you. Chen Ong didn't comment. His right index finger gently flicked in an irregular pattern, twisting the air into a strange black shadow that existed in an extremely distorted form above the space. A black tentacle carefully stretched out from it, twisting and swinging in the air, raising its body high. It was like a frightened worm. Primordial magic power. Ha! The low voice seemed to be amused, and he let out a shrill laugh. The small shadow in the air that communicated with the shadow plane shook violently, and the shadow creature's tentacle suddenly straightened. It let out a sharp cry and twisted violently in the air, as if it was struggling before death. A false concept. In other words, it should be the superficial appearance of the multiverse, the part that belongs to the energy affinity. The essence of magic is the universe itself, creating everything, defining everything, and subliming the existence of matter, energy, information, and soul. Among them, the part that can be affected by the soul. It is defined as primordial magic power. It is violent and untamed, enduring huge interference and chaos at any time. It is changeable and mysterious, like a lover with a strange temper, but also as crazy and great as the sea. If I had to describe it with one existence, it would be a woman. Ha ha ha. Cough, cough, cough. The strange existence laughed maniacally, even causing a violent cough. He endured the great discomfort and said with difficulty, I am Mistra. That BNZ will go crazy. What do? We put a chewing head on a woman's head. Well said. The definition is precise. The weave is like that. Even though Mistra has always claimed that she created the weave because of a war between Sala and Serene, We all know that she is the projection of the weave itself. We created her, and all the contracts and agreements related to the weave, its structure and weave, its information and its way of existence. It is the wizards who created the weave, not the other way around. The weave is not a god, nor is it an idol. We weaved it, and it is the agreement and existence of the spellcasters that defines magic power. Only those who understand this are legends. At least the spellcasters are, even though we use a precise term to call it. The weave is not an isolated existence. It's more of a conceptual thing. Mistra is a part of it, and perhaps there are other parts that symbolize it as well. In Chunang's memory, there was an existence that was closer to this concept. The internet was a concept that only existed in the physical world. It was made up of countless protocols and information, and it was an existence that existed only in the physical world. To be complete, it included the physical network communication protocols that represented the laws of the internet, information, and a part of the human spirit. The weave was built on the shallow energy interference layer of the multiverse. It was the sum total of all the rules and regulations related to primordial magic. In a narrow sense, it was the energy and information network controlled by the administrator Mistra. The main administrator, Mistra, had several related administrators, such as the god of wizards, a large number of spellcasters, a relatively large number of spellcasters, a relatively large number of spellcasters, a relatively large number of spellcasters, mages, and hackers who broke the balance. Similarly, there was the Shadow Weave, a competitor of the Weave system. What an interesting understanding, Lord Hallest. Chunang could not help but exclaim in admiration. Who would have thought that a mad wizard living in seclusion in the underground city would have such a crazy conversation with the controller of a small gang? This completely mad wizard did not seem to be as crazy as the legend said, unable to communicate with him. Of course, this was only Chunang's personal opinion. Most people would probably think that this was a conversation between two lunatics. If the world was magic, where were the gods? Keen intuition, unique perspective, my neighbor. Your gnomes have almost dug to the underground maze castle. I welcome a wise neighbor, but I must remind you that wizards are always eccentric and sensitive. There can only be one wizard tower in one place. Similarly, there can only be one leader. Hallis looked very calm, even elegant and wise. Considering that this was not the surface, his madness made people curious. Waterdeep City is a place full of charm. It is filled with the sparks of fate and spirituality. Living here, there will often be surprises to disturb you. Bards, shadow thieves, harpies, and scattered forest towers. You have quite a bit of trouble. How is this trouble? Chunang asked with a smile. Hallest was silent for a long time, then nodded in agreement. How is this trouble? Of course it is not trouble, because change is an opportunity. An opportunity that can be grasped is not trouble. But even so, there is still a long way to go before you can convince me. Chapter 150. Research and discovery had always been a process from shallow to deep. This determined that the understanding of all intelligent creatures would always develop from the shallow to the deep, from the special to the universal. Chunang was no exception. Just like the foundation of physics, the perfect and universal Newton's three laws of mechanics, based on the limits of what humans could observe, was once considered a universal truth. However, in reality, the scope of its application was the surface environment of low-gravity planets, or the environment of planets with a mass difference of less than 1,000 times that of Earth. In the universe, there were about 1 in 100 billion environments where this law was applicable. If one looked at the wider space, in the 1 billionth of space that humans could understand, there was probably an astronomical denominator that allowed its molecules to be slightly closer to the Newtonian system. This was a scientific system tailor-made for human civilization, and this was only the difference in one universe. The Toriel universe, or the entire multiverse, was a completely different world. The difference in its laws was so great that it was enough to subvert the entire knowledge system that Chunang knew. Of course, because the difference in the laws of the two worlds was not serious, this shocking difference did not appear, but it existed in reality and could not be erased. However, even if the difference between Faerun and Earth was increased by 1,000 times, and the gap between the two worlds was deepened by 10,000 times, it would not be able to confuse Chun-Ang's understanding of space. Because in terms of status, Chun-Ang, who could travel between different worlds, was at a higher level than the multiverse. Chun-Ang, who could travel between worlds, had a higher understanding of space than the entire multiverse. Perhaps it was slightly lacking in breadth, but no one could compare in depth. This was the convenience of high-latitude travel. Hallis saw Chun-Ang disappear in front of him, just like that. The teleportation foresight did not even have the slightest effect. It was as if the person in front of him did not use a teleportation spell, but had become invisible. But based on a mage's intuition, he believed that Chun-Ang had already disappeared from this plane, even though the magic net and teleportation foresight did not give him a warning. Hallis watched as Chun-Ang's shadow faded bit by bit, like a colorful spreading in water. The silhouette and shape blurred. Finally, like a hazy shadow, it disappeared in the flickering firelight. Hallis' vigilance was raised to the highest. It was not an ethereal form, not a vaporized form, not a teleportation spell, not a sanctuary. He silently thought about the possible effects of the spell. He quickly cast a reading spell in the direction of Chun-Ang, but it was to no avail. This is a supernatural power related to teleportation, Hallis said to himself. He had to admit that he had underestimated this mysterious man. The sense of urgency that he hadn't felt for a long time made his skin feel cold and tremble, as if a sharp knife had slid across it. Not only did it not make his mind confused, but it also made his mind sharper and clearer. In his body, the passion of a mage was boiling. A long ballad came out of Alastair's mouth. It was a low murmur. The indistinct pronunciation and strange emphasis made it look eerie and strange in the dark. The famous mad wizard's face twitched. He looked nervously at the place where Chun-Ang had disappeared, a fanatical and strange smile on his face. He murmured syllables that no one could understand and dragged his row closer. "Ah, found you." Hallis activated several protective items on his body. With a mysterious smile, he approached the place where Chun-Ang had disappeared. "I'm going to catch you." A blue mist streaked across Hallis' fingertips. The secret of the arcane spell. It lay in the wisdom that went deep into the bottom of the world, those who only knew how to use the wisdom of their predecessors. Someone who manipulates spells as if they were tools. Only worthy of being a spellcaster like a warlock or a golem. Not a spell weaver who weaved magic, or an arcanist who explored the truth. Hallis was undoubtedly one of the top arcanists in the world. Although he was a mage, he undoubtedly had the ability to touch the essence of the world. It was enough to peel away the complicated and ridiculous outer shell and delve into the primitive inner essence. It was also a prophecy spell. In Hallis' eyes, the essence of the ether plane was peeled away bit by bit. The illusions that represented certain characteristics of all things shed their distorted outer shell under Hallis' hands, revealing the relative characteristics of the surrounding matter and magic power. They abandoned the distorted and diffused infection and spread, revealing the essence of matter in the ether plane. The ether plane was a mirror, showing the relatively hidden essence and inner nature of the material world. In time and space, those invisible, existing, and unappearing essences that were difficult to discover in the material world were reflected by it. They intertwined with the essence of the ether, presenting strange and hidden illusions. Hallis thought that his understanding of this world was not inferior to anyone, even the gods. This was the arrogance of a mage, but it could not be said that it was without some truth. But now he did not dare to say that. He followed in Chun-Ang's footsteps and entered a world that he could not imagine. It was like facing a mirror and seeing someone enter it. The material world, no, it was the reflection of the multiverse in the ether plane. These distorted illusions actually stripped away the true essence. The advanced blink spell allowed him to flash between the ether plane and the material world. The colorful mist had disappeared as early as the first flash, and the distorted shadows of darkness and fire demons were his reflection in the environment of the material plane. Demons, dead spirits, ghosts, distorted corpses, and objects alternated with flames, darkness, sound, and ordinary objects, like the crazy intertwining of two worlds. Hallest had no choice but to use his great wisdom to analyze their essence. They represented and reflected the changes in essence of time, space, energy, and matter. He realized that he had never truly understood this world. What he saw, the colors, the sense of space, and the shape were only superficial. Quality, material, and temperature were only superficial attributes. The true essence of things was always deeper and darker under the surface of the sea. What they could explore was only the part of the dark sea that was exposed, like an iceberg. Chunong was at the end of a deeper level in the plane of ether, like the shadow in the deepest part of the mirror. He was wearing the simple white robe that he had used in experiments and staring at the river that flowed before him. In the plane of ether, things that flowed usually represented the essence of change, and water was often related to time. In the language of magic, it represented the long river of time. Interesting, but that's all. Hallest shook his head. The green light of dissociation passed through Chun Ang's body and disappeared into the ether polymer. You think you understand me, but you don't. You think you understand this world, but you don't. You think you understand magic, but unfortunately, you don't. You think this is the real me, but this is only a part of me. This is magic, mysterious and profound, isn't it? Chunong laughed. Hallest had lost his mind. His voice was distorted and low, and his eyes were chaotic as he stared at Chunong. However, his etiquette and words appeared calm and steady. Unless he was schizophrenic to a certain extent, he would not be able to express such a wonderful mental state. He hovered between reason and madness, chaotic but not losing his poise. The charm of magic lies in its profoundness, and the joy of a mage is to explore this profoundness. Thank you for bringing me here to see the deeper essence and changes of all things. I have to admit, you've left me at a loss. Chunong shook his head. That won't be the case. A mage is not a puppet that can be manipulated. The wisdom of a mage in battle should not be reasonable. Using one's own spells intelligently is the so-called wisdom that warriors and barbarians disdain. Using spells reasonably, combining with the environment, and using spells creatively can only show that one is quick-witted, but not wisdom at all. This kind of quick-wittedness is a quality that any qualified warrior must have. It is far from being smart or cunning, let alone wisdom. Hallest asked calmly, spells have never been used to obtain destructive power. A mage's power is always reflected in a broader field. A qualified mage must be a great lord, the owner of wealth, and an important part of a force. Power is the power of a mage. Can this be called wisdom? Chunong shook his head. Such a mage can destroy a country, a race, or even a civilization. He can exert his power to a greater extent and change the entire world. He uses his mind and conspiracy as his weapons. He can be called smart, but he can only be called cunning, far from wisdom. Chapter 151. Everyone could see the changes in the slums. Evil was spreading here, and of course, wealth was the same. Everyone here grew tobacco. They wrapped the precious wealth in spices and cloth, and then their brothers transported it to Skull Port to sell. This was a land of evil. Everyone was vigilant, even neurotically wary of outsiders. Alwyn found that the people here had a different mental outlook. There was an indescribable sense of excitement. This was completely different from the lifeless poor people on the Faron continent. They were gloomy and excited, full of the drive to get rich and the determination to do anything. If she had to describe what made the people here different, it would be ambition. Strong, ferocious ambition. She felt that there was a dagger in the eyes of the young men on the road. Gao's ambition was about to overflow. The daggers on their waists were polished, and the way they walked was in line with the most basic qualities of a rogue, dexterity and agility, just like a feline. Elwyn could imagine the agility and cruelty of the human body as they stabbed their daggers in. This was actually not something he could imagine. Many people had gone missing here, such as the tax officer and the rogue members of other gangs. It was dangerous to walk here, even for Alwyn's team. She had begun to believe that the people here had unimaginable enthusiasm and initiative for their evil deeds. They were decisive and cruel. Unlike those young people who had just entered the profession, Irwin was old enough to abandon those naive and fantasies. Although she had her own insistence on justice and order, she had already understood how cruel and fanatical people who had experienced the torment of poverty and hardship could be. It was not without reason that the Bloody Hand Gang could frighten those who coveted them and protect this huge profit. If it wasn't for the fact that this profit is too great, they would have the possibility of growing stronger. They have the potential to grow stronger. Irwin thought to himself. "Where is Bloody Hand now?" she whispered to the halfling rogue in the team. "That guy stays in the watchtower on the west side all day. I haven't seen him leave even half a step. My God, keeping an eye on him is the most boring job I've ever done." The halfling wall complained softly, but the security there is very tight. There are many magic traps and mechanisms. I've tried many times, but I couldn't sneak in. He hasn't been here for long. We can storm in. Jessica suggested. "I don't recommend this." The halfling interrupted. "We may have casualties this way. It's not that we can't afford to sacrifice ourselves. I'm sure that we can kill the Bloody Hand." My God, this nickname sounded like a third-rate mercenary. But how to put it? It's not worth it, For evil dog eat dog. It's not worth it. You're right, Wall. Elwyn thought for a moment and shook his head. Let's think of another way. The security of the Bloody Hand Gang was much tighter than he had imagined. They were not like the other gangs, which were made up of a bunch of old scoundrels and veteran bastards. Those people were selfish and greedy, and always used all kinds of tricks. These young people were full of vigor. She has a passionate, earnest, and responsible attitude towards work. Everything was so beautiful and sunny. Had they not hung the tax officer and the general affairs officer at the gate of the watchtower with such enthusiasm, Irwin would have thought that this was the territory of some righteous faction. "No, we don't have a chance." Wall shook his head and said, "They will definitely find us, then block us in a narrow passage and shoot through us with those extraordinarily strong steel crossbows. They are well-trained and have a lot of magic items. There are also a lot of magic items. We can't take that kind of blow." Wall's expression was a little evasive, and his words were hesitant. Those who knew him well could see at a glance that he was struggling with something. "Say it. Is there anything unexpected?" Elwyn sighed with his hand on his forehead. 200 feet from here, there is a secret passage that may lead to the basement of the watchtower, but Wall frowned. "It gives me a very bad feeling. Let's give up this time. There's no need to take such a big risk." "Wall," Loveland interrupted him and said calmly, "We trust you, just like we trust our own eyes and limbs. But you can't panic. Tell us what you feel, your intuition, and your guesses. We are partners. There's something underground. I don't know what it is, but there's a great danger hidden underground, enough to be fatal. We still have to go there," Elwyn said with certainty. "Why?" "The risk is too great. It's not worth it." Wall spread his hands and emphasized in confusion. "Because of responsibility, the responsibility given to us by kindness and justice, we can't ignore a huge conspiracy. The underground here is not within the scope of the underground maze. No matter what the mad wizard wants to do, the harpist has a reason to know. 95-27 patrolled its territory as usual. Underground, the goblins had dug more than 30,000 feet deep, at least 18 layers of the underground world, and even part of it was connected to the underground maze, allowing some monsters and underground creatures to sneak in. Of course, most of them were not monsters, at least not as monstrous as some of Chenang's test subjects. But there were always some survivors. Although they were already frightened and in a constant state of panic, they could still pose a threat to the goblins. 95-27 could not help but sigh. Although the goblins were the smartest race under the master's command and had been given high hopes, even building a small kingdom and civilization, their strength was still too low. If it had been the group of ogres, they would have been nothing more than a side dish if they encountered the underworld creatures. The heavy armored ogres and ferocious ogres would probably have eaten them alive. If they encountered the addicted ogre sorcerers, they would be in utter misery. There were already many evil creatures howling as they became the test subjects of the demon addicts. 9527 felt that their weak performance was a disgrace to the evil camp, although 9527 also felt that some of the experiments were too creepy, such as the biotic biomass, multiple weave contact cycle, brain golems. Especially the experiment of imitating the dual-core weave contact physique of the two-headed ogre wizard. Those 100-headed giants, human centipedes, and 3-headed and 6-armed wizards were too much. Drow were also intelligent creatures. The 100-headed giant priestess was too much. The ogres have already produced 3 of Lao Wada's favored. Sooner or later, they will become Master's test subjects. Only machinery and explosions are the greatest things. Of course, human alchemy is not bad, but the Sith alchemy that Master taught us is better. 9527 sang softly. More is better. Big is beautiful. They walked along the dim ropeway to the next level. The crystal on its arm suddenly lit up, sometimes dim and sometimes flickering. 9527 pressed the crystal with its right hand, and with its intelligence of 19, it immediately understood the three-dimensional text in the crystal. Damn it! Enemy attack! Enemy attack! 9527 anxiously stomped his feet. The enemy is close to Master's location. If you disturb Master, you will become the next stage of the ogre's experiment subjects. It had mobilized all the goblin patrols through the crystal. The ogres, war creatures, and kobolds also quickly headed toward the location of the alarm and began to set up control. However, because of their deep-rooted fear of Chun'ong, the experimental area where Chun'ong was had always been a forbidden area for the Demon Addict Legion and the Underground Army. Their power there was pitifully weak. This was not because they were not intelligent enough. It was a psychological misunderstanding. All the gnomes, all the goblins and kobolds thought that it was a place more terrifying than the abyss. Was there a need to defend such a terrifying place? The enemy would rather die in battle than go there. That bunch of trash, scum, and dregs. How dare they? How dare they hide these things under the city? Aren't those nobles afraid of nightmares? The underground maze is scary enough. Where did these goblins and kobolds come from? Aylwin looked at Jessica with a pale face on the verge of collapse. The priest, Horn, was turning over the body of a kobold. It had been hit in the chest by the priest with a warhammer, and the huge and ferocious warhammer had smashed its internal organs. Even so, it had attacked crazily for 6 standard movements. It died from the combined attacks of fireballs, arrows, crossbow bolts, warhammers, and 2-handed swords. Its corpse was a pile of mush. One had to know that the priest Horn's warhammer was powerful enough to shatter +1 magical armor. Not to mention that the warhammer itself was 8 +2 magical weapon. Horn was a well-known priest. Although he wasn't a priest of Coreus, he was still a priest of Nubian. He was a first-rate warrior who could kill and set fire to anything. However, the armor of the kobold was complete. It was an armor without enchantment. No, during the forging process, we used magic to process the steel. The design and construction are also superb. It's lined with soft but terrifyingly tough steel wires. The curvature of the outer shell is very precise, and the hardness has reached a terrifying level. The strength, material, construction, and tempering are all superb skills. Most importantly, this armor is custom-made for the kobolds. It's very standard, too. The team fell silent. They obviously knew what this meant. In the Faerun continent, evil was not scary, nor was cruelty. Dark creatures were even more common, but money was the scariest. This meant that all the mages on the continent were willing to trade with them. It meant that they could hire mages and magic items. Those who were so poor that they were crazy would sell themselves. Evil creatures with money had never lost, because justice was always poorer. Justice defeating evil was just a story of bards. Wealth defeating poverty was the reality of Faerun. Here, the goddess Mani had never lost. Is there an empire of kobolds here? Jessica covered her face. Her pale face could not hide her weakness and powerlessness. These kobolds are just warriors stationed here. That goblin status is higher than theirs. Alwyn helped Jessica up and walked in a more secluded direction. Removing the curse requires some time to recover. That direction seems to be their blind spot. Jessica, sit on the phantom colt. We have to hurry. A team of 20 is enough to tire us out. We definitely can't deal with our pursuers. No matter what lies ahead, we have to try. Horn used a prophecy spell, but it failed halfway. I saw a huge, ominous event in the future. There's a huge wave in the ether plane, and prophecy spells are completely ineffective. We won't have any guidance for a long distance underground. Something must be happening in the ether plane. That world is filled with distorted illusions. Illusions? We seem to have heard of this before. A few mages from a school of prophecy are said to be entangled by illusions. This is probably not an accident. We've fallen into a huge conspiracy. What's an illusion? The Black Robe of Hal Astor. Chapter 152. The name Hallis sent the entire adventurer team into a state of panic. The black-robed mad wizard, just like his countless peers, had a deterring effect. The name had a charm like a plague. It could make Elwyn feel deep fear and despair. It was like an invisible thing pressing down on them from the darkness. It had a suffocating fear that followed them like a nail in their backs, torturing them deeply. The only thing they could rely on was the sense of responsibility in their hearts. Justice and responsibility, along with fear, tormented them, giving them the only warmth in this wave of darkness. Everyone in the adventurer team became silent. They stumbled along the dark cableway. The cableway was made of thick iron chains and wooden planks. The dome was supported by huge stone pillars. There were also planks and tunnels dug between the rocks. The cold iron chains brought with them the unique dampness of the underground. It was bone-chilling, but they didn't dare to turn their heads, and they didn't even dare to turn on their lights. They didn't want to expose even the slightest bit of light, because they could already hear the subtle sounds coming from behind them. The sound of metal scraping against metal, the sound of uniform footsteps, and some muffled sounds. It sounded like something heavy had landed heavily on the ground, and the muffled sound spread far and wide. This was a place like hell. In the past, an adult male could easily take down the kobolds with a little training. But here, they were exceptionally terrifying. The elite armor and weapons, the berserk kobolds. They were bloodthirsty and agile. Their simple and efficient killing instincts made these evil creatures almost into war machines. There were also alchemy products that made loud noises. There was a goblin wizard who was proficient in using explosives and spells. The goblin wizard that almost wiped them out seemed to be an engineer based on his equipment. This made the adventurer team completely lose the courage to face their pursuers. Elwyn saw Horn, who was running in front, suddenly stumble. She rushed forward to support him. When she touched Horn's hand, Elwyn could not help but let out a scream. She felt that the palm was as cold as a block of ice. Horn, what happened? Elwyn took out the remaining scroll from her pocket. Thank God, there was still a remove curse. Horn stopped her. There's no need. It's useless. My lord is calling me. He is telling me that my destiny has come. Do not look directly at him. Do not look directly at Hallis Blackrobe. Do not pry into him from the river of fate. Don't look at him directly. Listen to me. Darkness and silence are the best protection for you. Those illusions, did they bother you? What is it? Erwin hugged him, using his meager body heat to try and awaken the last of his life force. That's not an illusion. It's a part of reality. Our souls are so shallow that we cannot look directly at the light of our Lord. We are bewildered by the fleeting shadows on the surface of the physical world, as if the world is real. When it truly unfolded in front of us, we realized that our shallow souls and pale lives were unable to bear it. Like an ugly person looking into a mirror for the first time, I was scared to death by myself. I was scared to death by my own ignorance and shallowness. I was scared to death by my own ugliness. My lord Nubian, do not abandon your pitiful lamb." Elwyn was at a loss. She did not know what was wrong with Horn. He looked like he was cursed, like those prophets who try to pry into the existence they could not touch. Her mind was in a mess. The pursuers behind her were getting closer and closer, but the road ahead was a blur. She did not know where to go with Horn in her arms. In the darkness, she bent down in despair and pressed her body against Horn's chest, feeling the coldness and paleness that were slowly peeling away. She prayed to the gods in despair, gods of the sky, earth, and sea, Lord of the astral world in the darkness. Who is my light? When I'm lost, who will guide me? The soul and personality are closely connected to the outside world. What you see, what you hear, and what you feel form your entire existence, the corridor of your soul. This understanding forms the outline of the soul. Who are you? Erwin was shocked by the sudden voice. Who am I? Haven't you been looking for me? Chenong's voice was still as calm as ever. The corridor of the soul is the essential existence of intelligent creatures, because the soul itself is pure. The things that separate your personality are the impurities of the soul, including emotions, memories, beliefs, and other insignificant things. Information is powerful. What you see, what you understand, what you believe, these are the things that form the essence of your personality. Information shapes you. But why is it that when you come into contact with the truth, you are faced with the embarrassment of the corridor of your soul collapsing? Why is it that your personality is destroyed by the truth? Just like that priest who would rather give up his life than believe in the truth. Why? Erwin could not control herself and asked back. Because you're living in lies and deceptions. The personality that you have created is partly fake, deceived, and falsified. The truth will bring you pain, extreme pain, and the pain of destroying yourself. You have to crush yourself to get rid of this pain. From the perspective of personality, from the perspective of understanding, you have to dissect yourself, crush your past self, get rid of those hypocrisy, those illusions, and reconstruct yourself. Compared to this horror, death is a kind of gentleness, so you are scared to death. Scared to death by the truth. No, you are tempting us, devil. I know your shady business. Just like now, we are in trouble, and then you come out to tempt us, to use us. When the tip of a pen draws on the parchment, our souls will become your toys, Erwin said angrily. You are wrong. Very wrong. You cannot defeat us. Falsehood and lies have shaped you, and faith is undoubtedly the sweetest and most poisonous fruit. Chenong sighed. The adventurer team climbed up the only cable and climbed to a stone platform. Erwin carried Horn with difficulty, tiredly, but pleasantly looking at the warm firelight not far away. The adventurer team had had enough of the darkness. No matter what was in front of them, it would not make them retreat even half a step. When they saw the old man standing in the middle of the hall, they could only regret their stupidity. Nothing could stop them in front of them, except for Hallest. They heard the most terrifying mad wizard in Sword Bay ask in a serious and logical tone, "Then, what is the true wisdom of a wizard?" Elwyn was surprised to see a familiar figure slowly appear in the air. It wasn't like the mages who used teleportation or door of space, who suddenly appeared there. Instead, it slowly floated up from the depths of the space, as if it had always been there, under the surface of the water. The true wisdom of a wizard is the exploration of the universe and the truth. Just like our predecessors persevered, the pursuit of the unknown, learning, and research. The voice was also very familiar. Erwin was sure. Suddenly, her eyes widened. She did not even notice that Horn, who was on her back, had slipped to the ground. She finally remembered where she had seen this face and voice. The bloody hand, and that demon. Clearly, she was not the only one who recalled their target. Without exception, all of them were cursing inwardly. It's just a gang in the slums. How cheap must this legend be to get involved with a third-rate gang? A legendary wizard who can stand on equal footing with Hallest. How unlucky must they be to encounter such a troublesome conspiracy on a routine mission? Is this the blessing of the goddess of misfortune? In the depths of the ether plane, Chun-Ang's true existence stood there. Even though he was only 5 steps away from Halist, Black Robe could not detect, sense, or observe him. The depth and level of the plane were so wonderful. Chapter 153. The difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. For the first time, Halist felt powerless, as if he had punched the air with all his might, toying with the opponent, deceiving him, luring him, controlling him, influencing him, controlling everything everywhere, letting the opponent fall into the trap without knowing it. Easily standing in a place where they could not reach, controlling the development of the situation, and at the most critical moment, gently pushing. This was the most common way for mages to bully barbarians, and it was the pride of every mage. He watched as the barbarians, who only had muscles, slid into the abyss step by step under the control of the mages. He watched as their intellect was crushed and they charged head-on into the mages' traps, using the elegance and power of magic to crush them. This had always been one of the few pleasures for mages, and Halist was one of those who could enjoy it the most. To a certain extent, the Terai maze was born to fulfill this wish of his. The underground ruins full of monsters and adventures, dangerous places with great wealth, and greedy adventurers who wanted to get rich overnight. This was like a huge stage, providing Halist with the perfect drama to toy with the adventurers. Now, Halist felt the powerlessness that belonged to the barbarians. He did not know what to do, and he had no way to deal with it. This was normal for a warrior because they were used to being bullied, crushed, suppressed, and slaughtered. But for Halist, for a legendary mage, it was undoubtedly a huge insult. Chun-Ang was right in front of him, but he could do nothing. He could not even interfere with the level of space where Chun-Ang was. He was like a man in a cage looking at Chun-Ang, who was looking at him coldly from outside the cage. He felt insulted and offended, but there was nothing he could do. The advantage of a spellcaster over a barbarian was incomparable. The resources needed to nurture a high-level mage were about 100 times that of a high-level warrior, and a legendary mage pulled the numbers to an exaggerated level. It could be said that without magic items, a low-level mage could kill a legendary warrior. In this world, only spellcasters were true professionals. As for warriors, they were all defective products that could not walk the path of spellcasting. They either had no money or time. Rich barbarians might be able to struggle, but barbarians without money were undoubtedly synonymous with cannon fodder. This was something all spellcasters believed in. Whether it was a priest or a warlock or a druid or an illusionist, there was no doubt that they despised professions that didn't have the ability to cast spells. Not to mention the proudest wizard among the spellcasters. As a noble among the mages, Halist Black Robe stood at the top of the spellcasters. There was no doubt that he could look down on any non-legendary spellcaster. According to the chain of contempt for spellcasters, he could even look down on warlocks, druids, psionic warlocks, and priests. Only Grand Arcanist could make him lower his head slightly. He didn't even care about the gods. However, he encountered an opponent that should not have appeared just like a god. In most areas, Chun-Ang, who had just ascended, was not as good as Halaster. But if the degree of understanding was a little higher, then it would be boundlessly high. In the spatial domain, Halist was like an immature apprentice, unable to lock on his spells, unable to interfere with domains. There was also an irresistible attack. Chun-Ang shifted his attention away from the mage who had suffered a huge blow. It seemed that he needed some time. Adjust your madness. 9527 led the Magic Addiction Legion and had already taken control of the adventurers who had broken in. They looked like they were frightened, and the way the half-elf looked at him was like looking at the Lord of the 9th floor of hell. Of course, Chun-Ang didn't think that this had anything to do with him. So what if the army brought by 9527 looked terrifying? Most of the test subjects had nothing to do with Chun-Ang. He had long learned to outsource the lower-level missions to the lower-level spellcasters. Even the Magic Addiction Legion and the Magic Addiction Laboratory were run according to the laboratory management methods on Earth. The interference of magic energy radiation on living creatures, the stimulation and adaptation of high radiation energy on living creatures, may be Chun-Ang's topic, But the magic energy transformed drow, semi-magical creatures, and even the undead radiation body were not his experimental results. With Hallest under control, the Terra Maze opened its arms to Chenong. The evil system of the Magic Shadow Legion provided him with a large number of soldiers and subordinates. The evil creatures from the wilderness were transformed into materials in the Magic Addiction Legion's laboratory. The worthless goblins, the weak kobolds, the underground drow who killed each other, and the wandering ogres, they sacrificed their only flesh for magic and endured the chaotic and crazy thoughts of the magic addiction spellcasters. What good could the drug addicts do? They were like artists, using inspiration as the main basis for experiments. Experiments based on inspiration and passion. Experiments like artistic creations. Chenong had to stop this behavior that was extremely wasteful of experimental materials. Although there were many surprising results, non-standard experiments could not provide a repeatable process. Although the evil creatures in the wilderness did not need money, they needed time to reproduce. There were no large goblin tribes around Deepwater City. There were many goblins. The kobolds had good blood compatibility, the ogres had high endurance, and the drow, as a test subject, had reached the peak of quality. There were also those orcs. The orcs were good warriors, but they were so chaotic that they could not form an army at all. The army in Chun Ang's mind was not the chaotic peasant army in the Middle Ages. Therefore, the laboratory had to do a frontal lobotomy on them, and the effect was amazing. They were no longer as violent as beasts in heat. Instead, they quieted down with a dull look on their faces and became very tame and docile. It seemed that their mania had been cured. Of course, there were a few minor sequelae, such as the loss of thinking ability, the obvious loss of emotions, and even the serious impact of memory. Basically, they could be regarded as a vegetable that could move freely. But Chenong thought that this was not important, right? What do the orcs need brains for? Because they had lost their bloodthirsty and aggressive instincts. Chenong still needed to make some adjustments to them. Some brain golems, high-quality products produced by the drow, supplemented by samples provided by the smartest goblins, were transplanted into their heads. The final product was satisfactory. Similar to a half-golem, half-living object, immune to most charm spells, stable and efficient battle performance, absolute obedience, a high degree of order, combat skills that could be directly instilled, and a bloodthirsty and ruthless attack style. When necessary, the brain golems could also be used to cast simple spells. To be continued. Chapter 154. Chun Ang's deeper exploration of golems and alchemy came at the cost of the orcs, who lost part of their biological characteristics. They lost most of their ability to think, a small part of their organs and tissues, and were replaced by brain golems and mechanical constructs. They lost some insignificant things in exchange for resistance to most spells and even more amazing destructive power. The evolution of a warrior's body was much slower than the transformation. The cultivation of a mage was also much slower than the creation of golems. The former required time, and the latter required resources, which was money. A large part of the deciding factor for the beastman's transformation was the cost. That was why they had no choice but to accept the gnomes' engineering and mechanical construction. They were very powerful, sturdy, and extremely destructive. Their only weakness was that they were somewhat unstable. In layman terms, they could explode. Chun Ang's solution to this problem was very simple. If he could not change the goblins, he would change the orcs. He asked Hallest for a copy of the Lich's information, fixed the effect of the teleportation spell on the brain golems, and then strengthened their skulls to reduce the cost of the explosion to an acceptable level. After the explosion or attack, the brain golems would be teleported into an incubator and kept safe. Then, they would only need to repair the orc's transformed body before they could be used again. Healing spells and restoration spells could restore the orc's physical condition, and the cost was low. Chun was even considering whether he needed to create a troll golem. Hallest thought that the orcs were no longer living creatures and should be regarded as half-undead golems. But Chun proved that he retained the greatest characteristics of the orcs: survival and reproduction. The Lei Maze city that Halist built was connected to the underground world from the underground of Waterdeep City using the underground hall left behind by the dwarves. The naturally formed underground cavity was very deep and huge. On this basis, the underground creatures that Halist enslaved continued to expand and excavate the Maze City for thousands of years. In the end, it formed nearly 20 floors. There were countless layers of the underground city system. Halist poured all his madness and obsession as a mage into this place. Like Chun Ong, they both had the romance of researchers, the unearthing of endless truth, and the exploration of the supreme throne of knowledge. In the Palace of Magic, their goal had always been the brightest pearl. This place was filled with his strange magic creations and magic experiments. Chun Ang's experiments at least had order, rules, and connections. Chun Ong also knew what kind of domain he was exploring. His experiments were exquisite and accurate. He always knew what he needed and had a clear goal. However, not everyone was like that. Chun Ong regarded magic as a science and used it to understand and explore the world, but some people regarded it as an art and were obsessed with exploring magic itself. Erwin and the others thought that Chun Ong was as crazy and powerful as Haurist, but what Chun Ong showed was both the focus of a researcher and the calmness that was different from Haurist. Crazy and calm, science and art, but the extreme self-expression. Terra Vane Maze City was a bigger city than Deepwater City. The residents here included all kinds of monsters, underground races, and magic experiments. These monsters were so dangerous that Deepwater City had always tolerated and feared the Mad Magician. Because once the monsters in Terra Vane Maze City surged out of the ground, the prosperous city of Deepwater City would inevitably turn into a demonic domain. Chun Ong expanded the Devil Addiction Army into the underground abyss as a countermeasure. But they were closely connected and integrated with Terra Vane Maze City. Hot red magma spewed out of the ground along the magic network that Chun Ong had opened and designed. It surrounded the abyss and Maze City. This was also the source of food for the large number of evil armies that he raised. Moss and fungi. Of course, Chun Ong also considered the source of food for those carnivores. After all, most evil creatures were not as cheap as the goblins. They wanted to eat meat. So the goblins, whose minds had been destroyed by the Demon Addiction Legion, came in handy. Chun Ong modified their bodies so that they could easily become fat, reproduce quickly, and maintain the intelligence of plants. Of course, they also retained the reproduction ability of goblins like rabbits. Most importantly, the modification was the smelly, disgusting meat. The results were very optimistic. The ogres said that it tasted like chicken and was crispy. It tasted better if it was roasted with fire. Even so, the ecology of the evil creatures in the underground abyss was already fragile to a critical point. So, Chun Ong had to slightly relax the experimental control of the ogre wizards and goblin mages, so that the population would be consumed more quickly. The failed products of the experiments were usually not wasted. Goblins also liked to eat meat. In order to alleviate this environment of food shortage, the goblins exerted their subjective initiative to a great extent. Although they said that it was for the great cause of their master, it was more likely that they were experimental subjects. After all, the ogres' experiments were a little too crazy. They learned their crafts well, and they also learned engineering and craftsmanship well. They built a small industrial area in the underground, and a large number of craftsmanship products supported the business and expansion of the Bloodhand Gang in Deepwater City. For this, they had to learn brewing, weaving, and carpentry. When Chun Ong took stock of the city in the underground abyss, he even found a large ship that was half-built. It was said that it was sold to the smugglers in Skull Harbor. After the abyss and Maze City merged, Chun Ang's research work expanded rapidly. Halist quickly obtained limited freedom, and with irreplaceable advantages, he became Chun Ang's chief assistant and helped Chun Ong control the entire Maze City. Halist stood in front of the core wizard tower, seemingly feeling a little emotional. He gently stroked the stone walls of the tower. A wizard tower was another life of a wizard. It was the most important existence. Even in death, He did not want future generations to touch it. Although he was not dead, the wizard tower no longer belonged to him. He could feel the tower's spirit's resistance to him. Although it was still the wizard tower that he had built bit by bit, he did not know when it had been completely controlled by Chenong. "How can you do this, my lord?" "My lord?" Harris shook his head in a daze and asked curiously. Chenong ordered the tower spirit to open the forbidden door. Hallis saw the two extremely dangerous blade golems at the door and moved aside, revealing the simple door behind him. Chenong led him into the wizard tower and said, "You should not ask why, but how. As long as you have enough time, you can do it too. Research, hypotheses, examples, experiments, repetition, summary." Chenong paused and looked back. Isn't the solution to a problem like this? The path to the end is different, but the direction is always similar. In essence, a wizard tower was a magic item that looked like a building. The design, purpose, and structure of the building was to gather magic. The shape of the tower, the tall and upright structure, was to meet this purpose. Mages or the builders of the wizard tower could establish a connection between the tower and the master of the tower, so that the magic of the two could flow and gather the surrounding magic into the wizard tower. In many ways, the wizard tower was not so much a residential building as a gathering and channeling device for magic energy. Hallis could still vaguely recognize the familiar arcane geometric structure, but most of the structure had changed beyond recognition. He could feel the resistance of this wizard tower to him, as if he was facing a strange mage. It was a strange magic that flowed in this place. Hallis had to admit that at least in architectural engineering, he was far from Chenong. A more reasonable spatial structure, more professional stress design, and those extremely imaginative structural designs were all things that he could not complete. Some of the designs were even difficult for him to understand. In terms of arcane spells, Chenong retained most of the magic flow and spell structure and only adjusted the core. But Hallis could see that this was still an incomplete framework. The reason why Chenong did not optimize the spell structure was only to leave room for modification and reconstruction. Chapter 155. The light in the Mage Tower was a little dim. In the twisted and grotesque appearance, a smear of darkness devoured the light from the magic lamps. It was like a lurking shadow, wriggling as if it had a life of its own. It was like a black fog, but also like a shadow. When Hallis passed by these shadows, a crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the shadow, revealing a blood-red, fleshy eyeball. The surface of the eyeball was covered with fine veins. It was completely white, with a red pupil in the middle. With Chun-Ang's footsteps, eyes appeared densely in the void, watching the two of them. Chun-Ang calmly stepped into the shadow. The blood-red eye was attached to his body, and the veins seeped out of the eyeball. It was as if there were countless eyes rooted in his body, wriggling and watching in all directions. The most concentrated place was Hallis. Hallis could already hear the rustling sound of the restless shadows, like countless wriggling insects crawling across the ground. His back was like a sharp coal blade, brushing past his body. His body instinctively had a layer of fine goosebumps. The rustling sound in his ears grew louder and louder. Hallis had only been delayed for a moment, but it was already as sharp as a cat's nails scraping against glass, making his brain hurt. Listening carefully, there was also the scream of a banshee. If an ordinary mage was here, he would have gone crazy. The banshee's howl was not a weak curse, but to Hallis, it was nothing more than a cool breeze. What made him vigilant and creepy was the twisted shadow. Hallis could tell at a glance that this was part of the essence of the shadow plane, but now it had appeared in this space. This was something that even he found troublesome. Hallis' evaluation of Chun-Ang rose by another 3 points. Plane teleportation was one thing. It was just using the laws of space. But playing with the plane in the palm of one's hand could distort, change the effect of spells, and even greatly change the nature of space. That would be a very terrifying thing. The difficulty was almost equivalent to playing with Shar, the Lady of the Night. Hallis even sensed a trace of arcane spells in the materialization of the shadow plane. This was the highest achievement of High Elves magic, and it had terrifying power. It was enough to shake the entire Faerun continent, even if this plane system wasn't mature yet. Moreover, it was very different from the maze, but the degree of danger was even higher. The planes that overlapped with the prime material plane, the planes that belonged to the deeper laws of the world, were all mixed together here. Shadow, ether, astral world, elements realm, and even some unknown bottom-level planes belonged to the deeper level of the main plane, meaning the plane's complete structure. Because of this, the unique plane within the Mage Tower displayed even more distorted reality. Part of the true appearance of this world was displayed in a very extreme way, just like a small space where spells were in disorder all the time and incorrect results of spells would appear. It was very magical, but also extremely dangerous. It was so dangerous that even Heraster felt a trace of fear. You couldn't teleport or cast spells here, and you couldn't even make too many disturbances. If you didn't want your spells to mutate, you had to hide your mana fluctuations and magic items to avoid triggering a magic plague or other extreme changes. A magic lamp 5 feet in front of Hallest suddenly twisted violently, and a mid-level fire elemental fell from the light. Then it screamed as it was burned by the flames. The lamp made of red copper seemed to have experienced thousands of years in an instant. In front of Heraster, it rusted. Finally, it rusted into a wisp of ash. The fire elemental also burned itself to death. Its spiritual essence and soul structure were burned to nothing in front of Heraster. There was nothing more absurd in the prime material world than a fire elemental immune to fire being burned alive just like that. But Heraster witnessed all of this. All of it was real. This was a place where the laws were distorted. This was an extremely unstable and complete plane. The laws could be manifested, distorted, and tampered with at any time. Even for gods, this was an extremely dangerous place. Under Chenang's lead, Heraster didn't fall into this familiar yet unfamiliar mage tower. Finally, they arrived in front of a huge furnace. Scorching flames rose from the furnace. It was a dazzling white, pure and destructive white. Such a pure white was even comparable to the holy light of mountain paradise. But under the calm appearance was a blazing heat that could destroy everything. This temperature, Heraster placed his palm on the furnace. The cold touch made the scene in front of him seem like an illusion, but Heraster still walked around the furnace solemnly, testing it with spells from time to time. The temperature can't rise so high. Even in the fire elemental world, such a high temperature will create an elemental lord. It's impossible for the fire element to not show signs of activation when it's so concentrated. Primordial magic was an extremely active energy. It was a mixture of matter, information, energy, and soul. Unlike Earth, in the world of Toriel, the gathering of energy would cause a chain reaction, including plane interference, energy activation, and even a chain reaction of the entire world. This also caused the output of most spells in this world to be extremely low. It was impossible to pile up an astronomical amount of matter and energy like on Earth. When primordial magic reached a certain value, it would trigger a higher level of change in the laws and a deeper change in the world. When the temperature of the fireball was high, it would connect to the fire elemental plane to balance the energy. Unless the temperature of the fire elemental world could rise as a whole, the temperature of the fireball would never exceed the normal temperature of the fire elemental world. But Chenang trampled on this common sense. The blazing flames in the furnace completely denied Hallest's understanding. Chenang stared at the blazing white light in the furnace and the bright crystal in the depths of the white light. The tide of origin power surged around his body. This world was called primordial magic, and in the Star Wars world, it was called the unified origin power. It was as violent as a storm, able to destroy everything at any time. The power of the mind, primordial magic, arcane spells, and psionic power were unified in Chenang's body. The rich evil source, accompanied by the evil mantra, flowed from Chenang's body into the furnace, causing the primordial magic to fluctuate even more violently. The crazy magic even made Hallest take a few steps back, away from the dangerous furnace. The wooden expression on Hallest's withered face cracked bit by bit. The condensed evil power made his magic go berserk. The flickering flames were crazy and intense, and Chun Ang's voice echoed clearly in this small room. The mantra with the evil source power calmly and firmly recited the words blessed by darkness. Peace is a lie. Passion is king. Following the voice of the mantra, Hallis saw the surging evil source power and primordial magic tear through the void, revealing the throne of the gods. The astral planes surged with crazy primordial magic, setting off huge waves of astral substance. The ether plane and the kingdom of the dead let out unbearable sounds, and the imprisoned souls of the nine hells and the bottomless abyss roared wildly. He heard the will of the abyss in the dark. He roared wildly. He heard the Lord of the nine hells let out a long sigh, heard the joyful laughter of the evil source power in the universe, and heard the countless evil souls wailing in despair. I exchange passion for power. I earn power with power. I win victory with power. The surging primordial magic slammed into this small world like a sea. The endless evil source power poured into Chun Ang's body and poured into the furnace along with the flowing magic power. The blazing white flames turned pure black, and only the crystal remained. It still emitted a dazzling red light. The gold melted in the flames and flowed under the crystal. Magic power and origin force intertwined between them, and following Chun Ang's mantra, it let out a surging roar. Hallis' footing was unstable. He looked at the crazy beast-like crystal and the gold that was as evil as the abyss. He felt the pure aura of destruction and evil. He watched as Chun Ang walked into the pure black flames and watched as the flames intimately licked against his body. But he was unharmed. A magic power mystery that he had been pursuing all his life happened in that instant. Fortunately, he remembered Chun Ang's instructions and used his powerful control power to restrain the primordial magic power. In the golden liquid, he engraved ancient magic texts and spell structures. He burned his spell slots to control the surging magic power and evil source power. 9 bronze rings rolled out of the flames first. In the narrow room, they scattered all over the floor, the copper of power and power. Then there were 7 thick rings that were the color of iron, leaping out the iron of power and blood. Finally, there were 3 exquisite gems of ring art and magic inlaid with gems transformed from primordial magic power. Just as Hallis was about to perform the last miracle alchemy, Chun Ang opened his eyes. The last words of the mantra resounded throughout the multiverse, like the wind, like thunder, like the roar of a beast, like the roar of a great river, like the low murmur of a god. The gods on the thrones heard the words that resounded in their ears. Surpass yourself in victory. The origin force is free for me to roam. The flames in the furnace fiercely shook, and the berserk mana tore through the space within the furnace. The berserk spatial storm obliterated everything, making this narrow plane on the verge of collapse. Hallis struggled on the edge of the destruction of space. His face was extremely distorted from struggle. The destructive power made him struggle to maintain the difficult situation until a hand calmed the spatial storm. Chun Ang stood in front of the ruins of the furnace. The red crystal shone brightly in the void, like the whisper of a friend or the greeting of a companion. It slowly fell into his hand. The red crystal sank deep into Chun Ang's right palm. The hazy light seemed to have a life of its own, flickering with Chun Ang's breathing. In Hallis' eyes, in the clear crystal, the long river of primordial magic power was as brilliant and deep as the galaxy. He was entranced, as if his soul was about to be thrown into it. Master, Hallis wisely changed his words. My mission failed. He lowered his head deeply, not daring to look directly at Chun Ang's face. His attitude was completely different from before. Chun Ang waved his hand nonchalantly and touched the ashes to wipe them. Bright golden light emerged from the black ashes. In Hallis' eyes, it was the light of magic power. It was as if his soul was moved, as if it was an indispensable part of his life that tightly grasped his gaze. That kind of gaze was infatuated and crazy, as if even his soul was enchanted. That's mine, my baby, my love, my soul. Halist reached out, wanting to snatch it from Chunang's hand. His expression was ferocious and crazy. Only when he touched the deep and dark origin power on the surface of Chunang's body did he retract his hand as if he had been electrocuted. His eyes instantly became clear. Halist, who had come back to his senses, knelt in front of Chunang, afraid to look at the golden ring. He threw his legendary pride and mage stubbornness to the back of his mind. In his heart, there was only fear and obedience to the ring, as well as absolute, humble obedience to Chunang. He no longer had the power and mystery of a legendary mage. He trembled like a woman. Chunang didn't look at him. Instead, he spun the ring around, and the scarlet magic runes flashed past. All the devil rings belong to the Supreme Master. The Supreme Master guides all the devil rings. The Supreme Master summons all the devil rings. All the devil rings return to the darkness. In a low voice, the magic runes on the ring carried a terrible, evil magic. The ring slowly fell onto Chunang's left index finger. The surrounding darkness was so thick that it seemed solid. It spread down Chunang's shoulders like a cloak. The light and flexible black cloth draped behind him like a robe. Chunang's face was hidden under the hood. The cloak was like a black hole that devoured all prying eyes. The consciousness of the One Ring appeared in Halist's mind. He instinctively felt some of the information the universe was telling him. He prostrated at Chunang's feet and said respectfully, "My great master, the Lord of the Sith since ancient times, the Lord of the Ring, the darkness of the universe, Darth Morgoth. Evil is not the goal. Darkness will be eternal. My Nazgul." Chapter 156. Primordial magic surged in the narrow plain. Chunang held the resplendent ruby crystal in his right hand, and a powerful wave of magic burst out from the crystal. With Deepwater City as the center, it swept across hundreds of miles. The weave in the void shook violently, but it was calmed by a powerful will. However, the aftereffects of the magic wave would take a long time to disappear. During this time, prophecy magic and divine spells would be disrupted by the primordial magic. Communication magic would be extremely weak, and it was almost impossible to cross more than 10 miles. The portal had also been destroyed in the magic wave, just now. Before the magic wave subsided, long-distance teleportation was extremely risky. Considering Chunang's powerful control over space, as well as the surveillance of the Magus Tower, this level of danger was almost fatal. Within this range, those who had less control of space than Chunang had to pass Chunang's test before the teleportation took effect. If they failed, they would be punished by exile, spatial slicing, or even spatial destruction, depending on Chunang's will. After the ruby crystal's magic power exploded, the brilliant light gradually dimmed. However, it was not a dull gray that had lost its power. Instead, it was more like a restrained light. It was not powerful, but extremely pure magic wrapped from the ruby crystal to Chunang's fingertips. It was a power that came directly from primordial magic, pure and powerful. Halist felt the wail of the weave. He seemed to see the arcane flames burning in the depths of the ruby crystal. This was blasphemy against Mistra. It was a divine artifact that was directly connected to violent primordial magic. Compared to the weave, it was weaker, fragile, and immature, like a newborn seedling under a towering tree. One day, it would shake the throne of the goddess of magic, just like Shar's shadow weave, because they were both great existences born from primordial magic. Halist looked at the crystal as if he was looking at a young god. Its nobility was far above that of mortals. Thus, it would not respond to orders other than its master. Only Chunang could possess it. Only Chunang could command it. It was a divine weapon that only submitted to its creator. It was the origin crystal. Halist stared at this great creation of the arcane mages in a daze. At this moment, even the mark that the supreme magic ring had engraved on his soul was shaken. This was the supreme pursuit of a mage. Hallest felt that in his soul, the arcane fire that represented the highest miracle of the arcane mages was trembling. He instinctively sensed that there was something at the core of the crystal. It was burning the only complete arcane fire in the main plane. Only Mistra, Shar's complete arcane flame, was a gift from primordial magic. Great Master, please allow me to know its name. Harris submitted to the glory of arcane fire and prayed devoutly. The name of the crystal would be his channel to communicate with the crystal. He could use it to use the powerful primordial magic. When casting spells, the number of spell slots he could use for each level will expand by +2. Furthermore, the source of its power came from the divine artifact crystal, not the weave. Chunong had given him the mark of the crystal. Silver threads spread from Chunang's right arm. The mithril threads, animated by magic, wrapped around the crystal, weaving beautiful silver patterns. Runes and magic symbols formed a long poem on the threads. This was a hymn to primordial magic. The flowing silver threads. A dark silver short stick was woven at Chun-Ang's fingertips. It was about 2 palms long, and the crystal was at its center. Crimson light was hidden under the mithril. Magic symbols and runes. The power of the crystal was woven. The pure power from primordial magic. Chun-Ong held it tightly in his right hand. As the power of the soul permeated, there was a sound. Crimson light spread from the crystal to the mithril stick. A clear red light appeared on the tip of the stick. Pure and powerful magic and soul power combined to form a blazing red blade of light. This was a Sith lightsaber. It had the violent and powerful characteristics of the force of this world, and it also contained the pure, tranquil power of Chun-Ang's soul. It was the tranquility from the darkness that calmed the violent characteristics of primordial magic, giving this weapon great lethality and unparalleled stability. It was the representative of primordial magic and the crystallization of the dark and tranquil side of primordial magic force. It was gentle and violent, and its blade was unstoppable. Even the gods could not stop it. The person who held it would receive the favor of primordial magic and have a stronger ability to interfere with the mind, but they would also be attacked by the dark side. It only submitted to its creator. Even though its creator was not immune to the attack of the dark side, if it was not its creator who held it, then one had to be careful of this weapon's constant temptation and betrayal at critical moments. Harris presented Chun-Ong with the 19 One rings scattered among the ashes. The 3 rings of gemstones that symbolized art and magic, the 7 rings of iron that represented power and blood, and the most complex, the 9 rings of bronze that represented power and desire. Power and desire. Chun-Ong played with a bronze ring, observing the world through the eye of the ring. The gloomy scene, the distorted outward, and the true ugliness and darkness. As expected of the most evil of the 9 rings. It did not have the great arcane power of the 3 rings of gemstones that came from the high elven magic, nor did it have the powerful destructive magic of the 7 rings of iron. But among the 19 rings, it was the most complex, the most evil, and the most adept at eroding the heart and soul of its owner. Its power came from the soul, and it also affected the soul. Its strength was not inferior to the other 10 rings. It was even closer to the existence of the Supreme Ring. This is a ring that belongs to humans, Chun-Ong said with a smile. It is the ring of the King of Men, the ring of betrayal and conspiracy, darkness and slaughter, power and desire, but is not worthy of its name. Why? Master, these rings are so powerful that they can affect the minds of the gods. They are no less dangerous than the Seri Sutra, and the power of the Supreme Ring is stronger than it. The power of the Seri Sutra originates from lies, but the power of the Supreme Ring originates from true greed. Truth always trumps lies. Harris was puzzled. It is a ring of power, but it does not represent power. Without being tainted with ambition and madness, and the noble blood infatuated with power, it cannot be considered a complete ring of power. Only a game of power can make it complete. Chun-Ong placed a bronze ring in Harris' palm and said with a smile, Let it be stained with blood." Harris raised his head excitedly, his messy beard swinging across his face, but his eyes were still glowing with blood. "I understand, my master. Waterdeep City will only belong to you, master." Chen-Ong shook his head. "It is not difficult to control this city, but it will not be easy to not attract the attention of the gods. If you have any methods, just say them." "I know you are good at playing with power," Chen-Ong said slowly after a slight pause. "Some words, if said too late, will kill. The lives of others are also lives." Chen-Ong spread out his hands. "If it is not necessary, do not kill." He looked at Harris' beard that hung down to his chest. Harris carefully organized his words. He had regained his usual calmness and elegance, except for the madness in his eyes. He was like a noble in the council. "Master, this is a great city. Its greatness lies in the fact that it does not belong to anyone. It is free, open, it welcomes anyone, and it does not belong to anyone. The Council of 16 Lords manages and controls the entire city. Except for the mayor, the identities of the others are kept secret. They use masks to appear in public. Some of them know each other's identities, while others do not. However, the mayor of Waterdeep City knows the identities of all the lords." For the first time, Harris showed a proud smile in front of Chen-Ong. "I have witnessed the growth of this city, and even created it. I have enough influence over the city. In fact, there are 2 secret lords under my control. Their positions as lords even came from their adventures in the underground maze. They have obtained fame, wealth, and power, so they work for me, even if they are harpies or other forces on the surface. This power is within your reach. Politics, wealth, conspiracies, and political allies. This game of power is extremely exciting. However, my Witch King, the rules of the game are things that others have to abide by. When you play chess with others, the smartest move you can make isn't brilliant chess skills. All you have to do is remove their chess pieces," Chen-Ong said with a smile. "The premise of all this is that you have the power to do so." Chen-Ong sighed. "Do we? Shaman King? The reason why those lords are lords is because they control the city. They are allies, and they are the city. Directly killing them will only cause the entire city to be destroyed." "They are lords?" Chen-Ong nodded. "Who can prove it?" "The Council of 16 Lords is very strict, and they have very advanced methods of identification. I don't even know the identities of some of them." "Master," Harris explained, "we can't replace them, and once we use assassination methods, it will arouse the reaction of the entire city." "You're wrong, Shaman King." Chen-Ong shook his head. "Whether they're lords or not, the tokens can't prove it. Even what they say doesn't count. It is the opinion of the majority that decides it, and we're the ones who decide the opinion of the majority. Who is the lord of the city? What I say counts." The sword of light danced in Chun-Ang's hand, creating a beautiful galaxy. The red light was like a twisted galaxy and sunset in the sky, winding in the sky and transforming into a sky underground. Harris was surprised by Chun-Ang's superb swordsmanship, but he heard Chen-Ang's clear voice in his ear. "I hope to see the 2 lords after dinner, and a list of confirmed lords," Chen-Ong said in a low voice. Chapter 157. In Chen-Ang's hands, the supreme ring was like the most unadorned ring, unremarkable at all. But Hallis could still feel the terrifying power that wanted to throw his soul into it. Perhaps it was an illusion, perhaps it wasn't. He knew that his soul had long since become a slave to the ring, and the supreme ring only submitted to one person, the Lord of Darkness, Vidar Morgoth. In front of him, Hallis couldn't even muster the slightest thought of resisting. Even if Hallis had forged the other 19 rings himself, it would be the same. The spiritual power of the 9 bronze rings, the magic power of the 7 iron rings, and even the arcane lock of the 3 gem rings had all submitted to the darkness of the supreme ring. Chen-Ong gently touched the magic power of the ring of Fire Naya. The power of the ancient elves' high, arcane magic took root in the weave and shook the majesty of Mistra. Through a series of entanglement, joining, bending, coiling, overlapping, twisting, and stretching of the weave, This structure that was woven according to a mysterious law formed a complex and grand magic structure. The fire elemental plane quietly approached the main world through ether. A huge, boundless energy flowed from the fire elemental plane to the main world. It was bound and controlled by Naya's power, forming a pillar of clouds in the sea outside Deepwater City. The blazing ring of fire. The power of the supreme ring controlled this powerful ring, and only this power that could trace back to the origin of the ring could suppress the violent elemental sea. The boiling seawater rolled, turning a dozen miles of the sea into a dead zone. Steam and heat evaporated into the sky, forming a dense layer of clouds. Powerful fire elemental energy was quietly accumulating in the clouds. Hallis could even feel a few very powerful fire elemental elders wandering around this abnormal area. They were enjoying and guarding the volcano in the sky. Then there was the ring of water Naya. The power of the lock controlled a part of the water elemental ring and projected it on the sea. The powerful aura of the water element quickly attracted a part of the power of the sea, setting off huge waves on the sea. Sea monsters and water elementals walked out from the depths of the sea, stirring up waves on the surface. The confrontation between fire and water had already begun in the clouds above and the ocean below. The chaotic elemental currents triggered the fierce confrontation between water and fire, forming a strong wind disturbance in the air, turning the sea near Deepwater City into a terrifying place like hell. Air elemental ring, via the last ring of gemstones, activated the power of the wind elemental plane in the air. It also caused the conflict between the water elemental plane and the fire elemental plane. An unprecedented storm that covered a radius of several hundred kilometers was formed between the three rings, and the conditions for its existence were met. Near Deepwater City, a huge hurricane was forming. Even the gods would be shaken by the crazy power of nature. The natural disaster had engulfed Waterdeep City, turning it into an isolated island. This huge port frequently interacted with the outside world. It was almost severed. Perhaps only the underground could maintain a sense of peace. Rustle. The road to Skullport was rough and dark. The spiders and monsters lurking in the corner of the stone path were awakened by the slight sound of friction. They cautiously placed their forelimbs on the ground, sensing the slightest vibration in the stone labyrinth. But they were so scared that they crawled into the cracks in the ground, because it was the sound of friction between steel and fur, leather in the ground. It came from thousands of different individuals. Collision, friction, knocking. The tough steel let out the most pleasant sound, converging into a torrent. It converged into a sea, converging into waves, drowning the stone labyrinth with unstoppable might. This was the sound of an army, a poem of war. The fleshy moss spread its tentacles towards the air. These sticky and stinky flesh carpet crawled out from the cracks in the stone. On their gelatinous moss carpet were the remains of spiders and monsters. Skullport was another Deepwater City, the City of Darkness. It was hidden under Waterdeep City and connected to the underground labyrinth. It was the favorite of smugglers and people on the edge of society. The sewers connected it to the entire city, forming the other side of the rotten, smelly, gloomy, and depraved city. The people who lived here were all rogues and villains. They relied on smuggling, coercion, violence, and bloodshed to maintain their survival. In other words, they were the competitors of Chun Ang's Bloody Hand Gang, and they were a vibrant social organization. Lek held his spell book, stumbling between the gravel and the cracks. He looked up and saw the backs of the orc warriors, which were as hard as iron, and the heavy armor almost as big as him. There were many warriors like this around him. To make a simple comparison, it was only 1/10 of the legal population of Deepwater City. This was less than 1/5 of the entire army that he saw. For a moment, this rather young lad could not figure out some of the things it contained. This number was still a mathematical concept for him. If he knew, he would not have made such a naive suggestion to Chun Ong to assassinate the person in charge of the rival. Only when this concept was associated with massacres, destruction, domination, and tyranny would have dominating power. The torrent of steel, cold and stiff, had a cruel sense of beauty. Light didn't know how he found the word beauty in the ugly faces of these orcs, but those huge, hard pieces of iron were full of a unique charm. A kind of ferocious, domineering charm derived from killing. Looking at the torrent of steel pushing open the gate of Skull Port with a slow but destructive force, Light could not help but press his right hand on his face, feeling the cold tingling of steel and the smell of rust. This smell tempted him to stick out the tip of his tongue and lick his brass knuckles. Then he felt a fact that he would never forget for the rest of his life. The taste of iron was the same as blood. This was Skullport. Every inch of land here was stained with blood. Every piece of wealth here was not easy to get. This was a place of ambition, greed, and bloodshed. It was a place outside the law, a city of shadows under the glory. Inithar, the Guild of Thieves, was the real controller of order here. In the remote corner of the shadows, there was a very thin shed. It was hard to imagine that this was the meeting place of Inithar, the Guild of Thieves. Chapter 158. It was one of the biggest storms in the history of Faerun. It had completely sealed off the connection between Deepwater City and the outside world. The waves on the surface of the sea were as high as 50 feet, enough to capsize a large ship with a draft of 6 feet. $F. At this time, the sea was as violent as a spoiled child, mercilessly destroying everything that could and could not be seen. Not to mention the humans, elves, and other land creatures that were afraid of the sea. Even the murlocs that were blessed by the sea were shivering in fear in this disaster. In the port area where no one dared to approach, there would be the mutilated corpses of the fishmen being smashed to the ground by the huge waves every day. Chun Ong used the 3 rings as hubs to control the range of the storm, so that it would not destroy the entire city. What he needed was a complete glory city, not a piece of ruins that was ravaged by the storm. Hence, not only did Chenong have to suppress Umber Lee's divine power, he also had to fight the furious god of calamity, Talos, for control of the storm. Although the battle between divine power and origin power was intense every day, the situation was gradually falling into Chunang's control. An undercurrent was surging in Deepwater City. The sudden natural disaster surprised everyone. The astrologer did not notice anything, and the mage of the School of Prophecy also found nothing. This seemed to be a storm that should not have happened. The priest prayed to God, but received only a vague message. This is a conspiracy, Mr. Mayor. Our old friends, the ocean goddess Umber Lee, who covets the prosperity of Glory City, and the god of natural calamity Talos, who is jealous of the peace and order here. Aside from them, there's also a brand new power of darkness. The sleeping dragon has yet to awaken. Darkness is coming. Pierre Galen shook his head. Deepwater Castle security had become much tighter than before, but a heavy sense of unease had always shrouded his heart. The recent greed of the nobles and guilds had exhausted his mind. The fragile balance between the adventurers, merchants, and nobles in Deepwater City was on the verge of collapse. Pierre Galen sharply noticed the pair of invisible hands behind the scenes manipulating everything. Talos and Umberlee, are the evil servants of Skull Port getting restless again? The key is not in Mayor. The old officiator took a step forward and moved in front of Bill Galen. He lowered his voice and said, "My lord's instructions will not be wrong." The newly emerged dark power was different from all the other evil existences that had appeared before. He was the deepest darkness. Not long ago, we could all hear a name echoing in the abyss and hell. Morgoth. The two of them spoke at the same time, and the syllables echoed in the dark abyss. There was a lingering smell of evil and blood. As soon as this cold name was uttered, the surrounding light became much dimmer. Apart from this name, we know nothing about him. Pierre Galen paced around anxiously before he finally stopped in front of the window and peered through the curtains. He looked up and saw the dark clouds hanging low in the sky. These few days, the scumbags in Skullport seem to be much quieter, but that's not a good thing. We all know who raised these wolves. They cherish their white gloves, but they stain other people's hands with blood. who didn't know how dirty they were under the splendid and magnificent official residence. They thought they could push me around, but they succeeded, didn't they? The officiator stood behind Per Galen. He sighed and said, "This is order." As he spoke, a guard knocked on the door. Per Galen returned to his seat, but the guard brought him news that made him lose his composure. In the deepest part of the shadows, the sounds of killing filled the air in Skullport. Dozens of crossbow bolts the length of an arm shot out from the darkness, nailing several rogues in leather armor to the stone wall. The slaughter continued. The kobolds carried their exquisite hand crossbows and shot at the enemy from a remote corner of the battlefield in a small team formation. They usually formed groups of 9, with the 2 best rogues alternating. Every time they fired, 2 crossbowmen would act as a shooting point. Each shot was guaranteed to have at least 3 crossbow bolts. For an assault, there were at least 3 shooting points. 3 crossbow bolts crisscrossed, and the 3 shooting points covered each other's powerful lethality. It was extremely difficult for rogues to escape this tight shooting net. The kobolds were kept dozens of steps away, and the range of their crossbow bolts was amazing. The power was also quite terrifying. The squads, with groups as units, crossed and moved forward, covering each other, never leaving the support group of goblins and ogres. Even for high-level rogues, avoiding dozens of crossbow bolts was a deadly challenge. Even if they could do it with their lives on the line, they first had to avoid the vicious witchcraft of the ogre wizards and the pursuit of the orc berserkers before they could rush into the kobolds and kill them. The reasonably arranged killing formation and cover formation ensured the killing efficiency of the kobold scout squad. The orc heavy infantry regiment in the middle rushed wildly along the predetermined battle route. The stupid greenskin beasts didn't know fatigue or pain. Chenong didn't add these things to them. The only thing they knew was to carry out Chunang's will to kill. The small, sharp weapons commonly used by evil forces were not much tougher than wooden sticks in the face of 300-pound heavy armor. Under the crushing of the war, like a steel fortress, it was difficult to survive. Only a small number of spellcasters could still pose some threat under the hunting of the Demon Addict Spellcaster Legion. But soon these few spellcasters could only turn into a pool of blood and flesh under the heavy crossbows and warhammers. The Skullport had attracted a disaster. The underground city where assassins, thieves, pirates, and mercenaries gathered had attracted a real war. It was bloody and cruel, like a thick nightmare. Limbs were scattered everywhere, and the torso was fragmented. At this moment, when the blood was swallowed, there was an earth-shattering collision between steel and flesh. The ferocious orcs and crazy ogres couldn't wait to tear the faces apart. The ogre wielded a huge warhammer that weighed over 150 pounds, and it made the most intimate contact with the skull of a skinny soldier. The soldier's skull let out a cracking sound as if it couldn't bear the weight, and red and white matter splattered all over the ground. Darkness and terror engulfed the place. The murderers who had brought nightmares and terror to the innocent were now facing their own nightmare. The power of the Supreme Ring silently seeped into the place. In the midst of killing and fear, the twisted power of darkness infected the blood and flesh on the ground and seeped into the people fighting. "Master, the situation here is settled." Harris leaned over and signaled to Chenong. The battlefield was already showing an overwhelming side, or it could be said that this had always been a one-sided massacre. "You can begin." Chenong nodded and replied. It had been some time since he came to Faerun. Chenong, or the Bloody Hand, had many conflicts with the Thieves' Guild in the Skullport. Most of the suppression and threats the Bloody Hand received came from here. Assassinations, poisonings, kidnappings, and coercion had happened many times, but so what? Chenong didn't care at all. He didn't even try to understand what had happened, nor did he care. When Chenong determined that the Thieves' Guild couldn't interfere with him, what they did was not within Chenang's consideration. Chenong rarely reacted to other people's actions. Most of the time, he wanted to do something and then finish it. Just like now, Chenong wanted to obtain Deepwater City, so he was prepared to eliminate some of the players who were not part of the game. This included the Faerun continent outside Deepwater City the gods, and some bits and pieces of Deepwater City itself. So he sealed off the route and created a relatively stable internal environment. He decided who could participate in the game, and then eliminated the bits and pieces that weren't part of his plan. Unfortunately, everything in the Skullport was included in the bits and pieces. This was the purest form of malice and efficiency, the simplest form of harm and plunder. From beginning to end, it was Chunong who took the initiative to harm people. He was doing his own thing, and his methods were getting closer to the nature of the world. It didn't take long for the massacre to end. It was almost dusk. When Chunong teleported outside Deepwater Castle, the sky was still a little dark. When Hallest appeared behind him, he asked, "How's the preparation going?" Hallest hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "I can't convince the lords to support me. They're too cautious, and there's no chance to control them. Apart from the 2 secret lords under my control, we can't get any more support. That's about it." Chunong paused for a while and said, "Don't think that it's too difficult. Most of the difficulties are just a matter of strength. It's not difficult to have a complete city, especially a secret city like Deepwater City, because they don't know who the master of the city is. Is it the Council of 16 Lords?" "Which 16? Chunong gently closed his hood and hid his face in the darkness. His voice came from the thick darkness of the hood, calm and firm. It was drizzling. Chunong walked along the mountain road towards Deepwater Castle. It was a typical knight's castle. The structure was stable, and it was built with very good magic-resistant stones. Although it was very uncomfortable to live in, dark and stuffy, it was a military building after all. The Sawajan people were killed and wounded here. This was the headquarters of the city sentinels and city guards, and the security was very tight. It looked like a young mage who was pretending to be mysterious. He was dragging a short and thick wand that was about the length of 2 palms. It was silver gray and was carried behind his back like a sword. Stepping on the puddles and braving the drizzle, he walked alone towards Deepwater Castle. The guards at the gate did not ask and raised a crossbow in their hands. When a sharp arrow pierced through the curtain of rain, the shadow melted into the rain like a puff of smoke. Chunong's silhouette slowly disappeared. In an instant, alarm bells rang. Well-trained guards guarded the important checkpoints. Under the instructions of the guards, a few mages released a detection portal to the open space. In the vision of the ether plane, ripples representing changes in space slowly spread in the open space. But there was no trace of the portal, and even the shadow power of the shadow plane could not be detected. "He's not there." The young mage turned back and said. Suddenly, he heard a short sound, like a lightning bolt passing through a human body, but a little lighter. It was a pleasant sound of Z. Then he saw a red stream of light, beautiful and hot, jumping around, beautiful like a pure red rainbow, passing through the body of the oldest mage. To be continued. Chapter 159. The buzzing sound and the smell of blood reverberated in the air. From the disappearance of the shadow to the appearance of the red arc of light, it was only a blink of an eye. Not many people reacted until the old mage's body fell limply. In the eyes of the young mage, there was only a flash of fatal light. He couldn't even recall the swordsmanship that flowed like clouds and water. Almost in the shortest time they could react, rippling red light flowed out of the shadow's hand. The defense of mage armor and magic items under the red light was as fragile as a piece of thin paper. Just the moment it pierced the skin, it was deprived of life and soul. The red blade of light carried a powerful energy. The primal magic binding formed this blade that looked like a red crystal, and it had a powerful lethality. And that mysterious shadow was even more elusive, like a phantom. Chunong stepped on the water, and from a tricky angle, he pierced the heart of a guard. The vibrating force destroyed the balance of the 2 warriors in front of him. Just an angle adjustment allowed the 2 to pierce each other's bodies. The blade of light gently reverberated and sank into the chest of a rogue behind him. Without the slightest hesitation, Chunong slipped into the darkness, jumping along the shadow plane between the 2 planes. In a short moment, he calmly jumped between dozens of shadow coordinates. The blade of light in his hand turned into red lightning wrapped around his fingers, splitting and entangling in the rain, like hundreds of light threads as thin as hair, swinging along Chun-Ang's right hand. The young mage turned his head at this time. He saw dozens of red light threads, following the trajectory of the shadow, disappearing into the deepest part of the shadow. At this time, the guard that was pierced by the blade of light like a marionette fell with a bang, until the body fell. Someone shouted, "Enemy attack!" A loud horn sounded from the tower, waking everyone in Deepwater Castle. Everyone took their positions in an orderly manner. Many spellcasters joined in, and the city guards did their best to block the red arc of light. Chun-Ong moved between the shadows as if he was strolling in a park. He could appear from the most unexpected places. Even a shadow the size of a fingernail could become his jumping coordinates. The mages tried their best to stop him, but the dimensional anchor couldn't hit Chun-Ang's figure at all, and the teleportation restriction spell was useless. The blades of light danced in the air, creating a red flower, then 1,000, 10,000. They shone at every spot where Chun-Ong flashed. A complete red flower. It represented the simplest variation of the blade of light. A stretch, a buckle, a block, a twist. It could always cut through the guards' weapons and drill into their chests. Arcana techniques were completely useless. Chun-Ong wasn't able to dodge them easily. The spell structure was destroyed by the blade of light, causing it to dissipate into nothingness. The light blades, made of the purest primordial magic power, could even pick up arcana spells that had a stable structure before they were activated. It could reflect most enchantment spells. The defensive formation of the city guards couldn't be said to be imperfect, and the loyalty and fighting will of the guards couldn't be said to be weak. They had done the best within the scope of their own knowledge system and wisdom. The reasonable layout, the spellcasters' counterspells and counterspells, and even the spells they remembered were carefully arranged. But it was useless and only made them appear more powerless. I hope you can maintain restraint. Chun-Ong emerged from the shadows. Following his footsteps, a rather large circle appeared on the plaza and moved along with him. He calmly swept his gaze over these young and resolute faces, and with the clearest voice he could muster, he said, "Out of a responsible attitude toward your lives, I hope you can make a choice of your own volition. It has nothing to do with honor, nothing to do with mission, but a choice of your own heart in the face of an unstoppable force. Is it to maintain this order, or to choose another possibility? Survival or resistance?" Red magic threads wrapped around the necks of these city guards. These tough magic threads could easily cut through human skin. Everyone knew that as long as Chun-Ong moved his fingers, everyone's head would fall to the ground. But no one spoke. "My lord looks after me." These warriors arrogantly and slowly raised their heads, their eyes meeting Chun-Ang's deep gaze. Despicable, faithless, laughable clowns under the glory of the gods. Our lives may be taken by you, but our souls will ascend to the divine kingdom and accompany our Lord. Even if our bodies fall into dust, our souls will never yield. Do you think that your thoughts, your will, and your soul belong to you? Chun-Ong opened his palm, revealing a bronze ring that was reflecting a dim light. But it's not. Asterisk ding. Asterisk, the ring fell to the ground, rolling along the beautifully patterned marble floor. Finally, it hit the boot of a city guard and stopped. The ordinary-looking bronze ring attracted everyone's attention. A rough hand picked up the ring. He held the ring tightly, feeling an unprecedented sense of fullness. Then, the ring in his hand was snatched away by someone else. "This is the ring under my foot." The guard in boots bared his teeth and threatened, "Don't steal my ring, thief. That's my ring. It's mine." The guard whose ring was snatched was extremely angry. He used the hilt of his sword to hit his comrade who snatched the ring until his head was bleeding profusely. Only then did the guard loosen his grip on the ring. The guard pried his comrade's hand away, and the guard who snatched the ring did not care about the serious wound on his head and held his right hand tightly. "This is my treasure. It's mine." "Ah." The ferocious-looking soldier broke his finger and snatched the bronze ring from between his fingers. Soon, everyone forgot about the existence of Chunong. They only had eyes for the ring, and the guards began to move fiercely until the first person used the weapon in his hand. Only 2 breaths had passed. Those incomparably firm guards were able to point their swords at the hands that tried to take the ring. Every one of them had an extreme desire for the ring, but they did not lose their rationality. Or rather, they still had the ability to think. But when this ability was used wholeheartedly to satisfy a need, malice was born. When the first person had the thought of kill the others, and the ring will be mine, this malice was placed at the highest level. The first person who put the ring on his finger was shrouded in a thick black mist. He began to use this mist to control the city guards who attacked him, causing them to draw their swords at the people next to them. The killing began between the 2 groups. Their swords were as firm and sharp as ever, but they were aimed at their comrade. Not only did the malice not make them crazy and chaotic, but it also made these people more rational. They calmly analyzed tactics, considered the situation, observed the weaknesses of their comrades, and even formed alliances and unity. But their core was only to take that ring. They could sacrifice everything for it. Chun-Ong left Deepwater Castle because the result only needed to wait. Betrayal and desire, greed and killing were more terrible than madness. It was selfishness and rationality. The battle in Deepwater Castle lasted for a long time, from dusk to dawn. Not many people died because the smart and rational contenders consciously maintained a bottom line when they found that their lives would be threatened. They would eradicate competitors and ensure that they could not return to the fight for the ring. They would set the rules of the game to protect themselves from harm. To protect themselves from harm, most people would only cripple their opponent's mobility. In the castle, it was not an irrational killing. On the contrary, everyone became very smart. They used all the means they had learned to fight for the ring, but they also chose to compromise temporarily and even deceive. They released the beast in them and chased it. But that beast was cunning. Cunning enough to learn to compromise and give up. Order, destruction of order, deception, betrayal, violence. Alliance. In a short night, a political drama appeared in Deepwater Castle. Influenced by what they saw and heard, the city guards and sentinels exhausted all their potential, using all kinds of intrigue. They were smart, they were cunning, they were like jackals wandering in a net of people. In this farce, the dark side of human nature was played out. They were all striving to be the final winner. This was a war of nearly 1,000 smart people. There was nothing they couldn't give up. Even the ring, they could compromise and temporarily give it up. Everything was for the sake of being the last person to hold the ring. These people learned by themselves and became top political experts. Chun-Ong provided them with extremely advanced theoretical education and ideological works from other worlds. In order to fight for the copper of power, they used all their skills and used all their potential to fight with others, to use and be used, to betray and form alliances, to calculate and use tactics. Under the surface restraint and order, there were countless invisible darkness and bloodshed. The city guards were getting closer and closer to normal people, devoutly learned everything that Chun-Ong instilled, including the great realistic works House of Cards and Workplace Politics. They actively discovered the weaknesses of human nature. They organized several teams in the small Deepwater Castle. They used the worst of intentions to speculate about others, but their rationality allowed them to maintain a relatively stable and safe order. They cherished their own lives, and they established a set of effective rules of the game. Then, they racked their brains to cheat and overthrow these rules in the process of operation. These people played out what politics was. This game of power didn't end until 3 days later. More than 300 people were forever buried in the garden of Deepwater Castle. Some of them were stabbed in the back, some fell into the water, and some were collectively executed for breaking the rules. Archmage Elminster had sealed the ring so that everyone could calm down. However, even if the charm could be removed, could the tainted souls be removed? Having delved into the dark side of human nature and learned the most cunning of political conspiracies, these ordinary guards became extremely dangerous. Lies were like their mother tongue, and disguises were like their skin. Even among the drow, They were the most outstanding schemers. Compared to the victors of this game, the nobles of Deepwater Castle were as immature as children. Even Elminster felt fear in his heart when faced with these seemingly wise and clear-headed gazes. To be continued. P.S. This chapter should be from yesterday. Recommended. Law of Fantasy World Traversal by Netherblade. Chapter 160. The wind raged, and the turbulent air currents lashed at everything around them like whips. When a large tree that could be held by 2 palms by the port was split into 2 by a wind whip, Chenong was standing beside it. The branches that were wrapped in the strong wind were like powerful arrows that could pierce through 2 layers of chainmail. In this kind of weather, going out had become a very dangerous thing. Waterdeep City was as empty as a ghost town. For the citizens here, the safe underground world had been massacred by unknown forces and was currently being rebuilt. They didn't dare to risk their lives for the time being. The world above ground was ravaged by the wind. The believers of the god of calamity, as well as the wind elementals that belonged to him, attacked everywhere and spread fear. Everything seemed very calm, but some of the things that Chenong needed were fermenting in this tranquil atmosphere. Since that night, everything has been very wrong. I can feel an undercurrent moving around me. Young boys, who used to have such a bright future, but now their eyes are tainted with something else. Ambition and desire. Standing where Pierre Galen used to be, Kelburn Blackstaff looked at the raging wind elements in the sky and spoke to Elminster, the great sage who had come from afar and was also a chosen of the goddess of magic. Elminster shook his head. It's not a bad thing for children to be ambitious. You know, old friend, who hasn't been young, who hasn't made mistakes when they were young? Ambition is the pride of young people. But some mistakes can't be undone. Young people are more easily tempted. Once they make a mistake, they will go further and further down the wrong path. We should guide them correctly and not watch them fall into darkness. He was silent for a moment. He sighed. 3 children have already betrayed their vows and committed the great sin of murder. Old friend, we can't do it. The path of kindness is too winding, and the temptation of evil is close at hand. Elminster took a deep breath and sighed. Impatience is a mistake that every young person makes. You can't make them like us. Insist on kindness and love, equality and understanding. They can't see suffering as a pearl and torture as a treasure. They can't see what's truly important to them. They naively believe in justice and seek it from the outside world. But we all know that justice exists in our hearts, and yet it doesn't exist in Faerun. From Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep City, from AMN to Icewind Valley, fairness and justice never existed. But faith and persistence in justice are the most precious. Do you still recognize that black-robed man? Kelburn asked with widened eyes. 3 months ago, I felt that shivering coldness. At that time, I thought it was an illusion until a few days ago when I heard the abyss trembling and the gods crying. At that time, my ears echoed with the tides of primordial magic, and I heard the hymn of the origin of evil. In the end, the entire world was filled with that name. His eyes wandered for a moment. He muttered, "That name that cannot be spoken. Please allow me to use the name of the one on the Blackstaff Tower, to call him Mirko." Elminster laughed. He looked at Kelburn Blackstaff, who was tortured by fear, and winked at him. "That's right, it's just Mirko. Old friend, have you forgotten? Here, you allowed death to live up to its name. The god of the dead. Become a wandering ghost." Elminster laughed as he spoke. Kelburn froze for a moment before laughing along with him. It was as if they had returned to the time of the Avatar's Avatar, that thrilling adventure. Together with Midnight and Kalemver, they had sent the god of death, Mirko, to heaven in Waterdeep City. That was the adventure that made them famous all over the world. "Huh, old friend, I've almost forgotten about that." Kelburn's gloominess and fear were swept away, and the memories of his youth filled him with vigor. His face was flushed as they sang the songs of the bards, singing the epic of the goddess of magic, Midnight, and the god of death, Wakalember, walking with the gods. Their joyful singing allowed Kelburn to escape from the shadow that had always shrouded him. "Old friend, after contacting you, I took the liberty to peek at that name. Elminster shook his head solemnly. Rashness is not a good habit for a mage, old friend. You should not try to spy on this evil and powerful existence. His name is the King of Darkness, and his title is the Lord of Evil. Those who spy on him will be cursed. Caution is the most important thing we have to protect ourselves. Yes, Diaz Mirko. I should not have tried to spy on him. Kelburn said, still feeling a little guilty. Diaz is the dark side of the universe. I had never looked directly at such pure darkness before. It was so dense and pure that even my silver flames were on the verge of death. I tried to spy on the deeper side of this name, but I sensed many evil and powerful souls. They represent this name, using blood and strength to die it with dignity. Many of them were extremely evil, their wisdom and power making me feel insignificant and laughable. When I touched the darkness that they represented, Elminster, even my soul was tormented. The crazy thoughts in my mind made me unable to sleep at night. I was confused and indescribable at that time. I believed that I had fallen into an abyss deeper than the abyss, and that a monster called Diaz Kelt was in my body. What pained me the most was that I despised the gods. They were despicable and ignorant. I thought that I had touched the great existence of this universe. The world told me that it was called the Force. Kelburn curled up, looking old and tired. I used my soul to resist its call. Every day when I woke up, my soul was covered in wounds. It's all over now, Kelburn. Elminster hugged him. His voice was hoarse, but the power in his words was extremely warm. He comforted his poor old friend. The goddess still cares for you, protecting you under her glory. But I feel fear, old friend, Kelburn muttered. The Force is like my mother. He buried his head in his arms, not wanting to hear Elminster's explanation. I'm hesitating. If the gods are shallow, where should my soul go? In my craziest days, the gods made me sick. Elminster could feel the torment and unease, because truth was sometimes scarier than blasphemy. The reason why it was difficult for a mage to become devout to the gods was because of their desire for truth. To the gods, revealing their truth was more sinful than blasphemy, because the former made them angry, and the latter made them afraid. He was a master of toying with human nature. The old mage took a few puffs of tobacco to warm himself up, dispelling the lingering chill. The black-robed man, or rather, Mirko, had always been able to grasp the weakest part of human nature. He knew that lies and deceit could only last for a while, but the truth could change a person forever. Letting a person know the truth that they should not know was worse than deceiving them. Elminster knew how that kind of truth could destroy a person. It was like being manipulated, ruled, and used by the city guards who knew the truth about the nobles and the council. They must have understood their situation and the deception they had been subjected to. The truth was that they had no future, or rather, most of them had no future. They survived danger and war, and retired as the backbone of a moderately wealthy family. They supported a warm, small home. Young people could not accept a future without a future, and they did not understand the value of peace and warmth. Elminster was willing to trade everything he had for it, but he also knew that the young people would not give up. They chased after power, wealth, prestige, and honor. They longed to be above all, but the truth was that it was impossible. Merchants, nobles, guilds, and councils, those who were already there, could not make room for them. That was the truth that they should not know. Ambition would be aroused, and they would be angry at injustice, oppression, and framing. In the end, the anger of pursuing justice and fairness would burn everything. Those clever young people, those children who had been indoctrinated by Mirko in schemes and politics, would use this evil weapon to pursue their dreams and ambitions. Elminster was saddened by this. There would be no winners in this game of power, and the false justice that Mirko exposed would eventually destroy these children. Along with Waterdeep City, Elminster clutched the bronze ring in his hand. He was a little afraid, and it was this fear that kept him vigilant. How did you break free from these crazy illusions? Elminster turned to look at the silent Carl Blackstaff. Carl looked up and shook his head with a bitter smile. The ring. What did you say? Elminster asked solemnly as he walked up to him. The ring. 19 rings. Carl sang. The elves of the world forge 3 rings. The dwarves of the underground obtain 7. The mortals possess 9. The demons and demons lurk in the shadows. The king of darkness possesses the supreme ring. You're wrong, Blackstaff. You're very wrong. Elminster warned. Give it to me. It's not with me. Carl shook his head. Give it to me. Elminster shouted. In the name of the goddess, give me the ring. I can't do it, Carl replied angrily, but he quickly realized that he had lost his composure. After a moment of silence, he said softly to Elminster, I can feel its control over me, but I can't leave it. I need it to protect me against Darth Carl. The ring has magic. So that night, when I told you about Waterdeep City's crisis, I threw it into the deep sea, downstream from the port, and let the winds and waves devour it. I hope you're telling the truth. Elminster said solemnly, but you have to tell me why you came looking for me today in fear. Is it Darth? No, it's an eye. Chapter 161. Chunong stood in front of the port, the 3 gemstone rings hovering above his chest. Behind him were raging winds and huge waves, and to his left and right were lightning. These destructive forces were repelled and slid away within 4 feet of him. Even though he was standing in the center of the disaster, everything around Chunong was still calm and peaceful. Just now, he had won a decisive battle with Talos, the god of disaster. Not only did he gain control of the disaster, he even tore a bit of divinity from Talos' divine authority. Gales wrapped around Vaya, the ring of air, and the angry roar of the sea resounded from Nanya, the ring of water. Thunder and lightning surrounded Nanya, the ring of fire, and turned into blazing flames. This was a high-level magic from the elves of this world, an arcane magic from the homeland of the elves. Its power spread from the 3 rings around Chunong, stripping some of Talos' divine power to control the laws of this area. Thunder roared crazily above Chunang's head. The boundless fury of Talos turned into lightning and raging flames that descended from the sky, but Chunong played with them with contempt. The Lord of Storms, the god of disaster, had suffered a crushing defeat in the war against him. The Darkness Origin Force had even contaminated a part of his divine power, forcing him to sever his divine domain. This innately angry god showed his calm side at this moment. He didn't care about the temporary gains and losses, and even took the initiative to bestow a part of the 3 rings with his divine power, obtaining a part of the ring's authority. He didn't even interfere with Chunang's actions, even though it was a complete blasphemy to him. Chunong, who tried to control the natural disasters, was his enemy, but compared to his other mortal enemies, he might be able to make use of him. For gods, the war would last for a long time, and plots and schemes would be present throughout the entire process. He's here. Elminster, who was standing at the top of the Tower of Order, looked at the raging storm in the distance. Mirko won the war against our old friend. He's free to deal with us. Talos' defeat is only temporary. He might have a deeper plot, but no matter what, we have to face an excessively powerful enemy, a god of fear, or a new dark force that can defeat him. This is the most dangerous time for Glory City. They had arrived. Against the tide of darkness, the city guardians and sentinels are no longer trustworthy. The temple supports us, old friend. We still have the support of the Shrine District and the Onmin Guild. Our warriors can fight against the enemy, but they can't defeat the hurricanes, tides, and thunderstorms. The sudden glare shut Carl's mouth. The blue river descended from the sky, pouring down on the dam and the city wall not far away from the port. It was a blazing electric current that flickered with dazzling light. Blue, orange, and scarlet lightning balls of various colors surged in the direction of the lightning river. An earth-shattering sound wave swept through the entire city. The paladin guarding the castle was flung high into the air and slammed into the ground a dozen meters away. The sound wave tore apart most of the fragile items in the room. Even Carl, who was standing at the window, was thrown out by the shockwave. Elminster tried his best to protect his old friend. He only had time to cast a greater wall of exorcism on the densest area of the lightning balls. However, the spell didn't work. Most of the lightning balls broke through the barrier. Elminster had no choice but to form a lightning ring around himself and his old friend. More than 500 lightning balls exploded in Deepwater City at the same time. The shockwave alone was enough to overturn the entire shrine district and affect half of the coastal area. Lightning bolts danced in the ruins, attracting even more powerful lightning bolts from outside the city. The lightning from the entire hurricane was concentrated in this small city. The powerful explosion first destroyed most of the buildings in these two areas. The shockwave from the lightning ball could effectively destroy buildings, but what was even more fatal was the elemental damage that the lightning ball carried. Most creatures within 4 feet of it would be destroyed. Only the higher-level creatures could withstand the elemental damage. Only those with a legendary physique could survive. The gems on the 3 rings on Chun-Ang's hand dimmed a little. The elemental energy stored in the Calamity Lock had been emptied, and more energy was being extracted from a larger area outside Deepwater City. Powerful natural energy gathered from all directions, accumulating in the clouds. The large passage connecting the elemental planes was also opened. More and more wind elementals appeared in the gale, roaring as they tried to approach Deepwater City. Small and medium-sized water elementals and wind elementals fell from the sky and attacked the surviving Templar warriors in the heavy rain and gale. Hurry up and support the other shrines. Ask for reinforcements from the Onmeen Guild and new Orem Academy of Bards. Use the private forces of the guilds, and use the city guards as the basic commanders. Recover as much combat power as you can. Elminster's face was ashen. He stood at the highest point of Deepwater Castle and looked down at the heavily damaged city. The sleeping dragon has awakened. The darkness has come. Carl, who was in a sorry state, looked at the almost completely destroyed shrine district with a gloomy expression. Veins popped out on his hands as he gripped his staff tightly. How dare he? How dare he? So many shrines. How dare he do this? Darkness seeks its own destruction, and it must first be driven mad, Elminster said angrily. He pointed at the scorch marks on the city walls and the remains of the shrines. This isn't arcane magic. I can't see any traces of the weave being distorted, and the Lord would never allow such a destructive attack. It would destroy the balance of the weave. Only divine power can interfere with the prime material plane on such a large scale. This is an elemental interference caused by a powerful god who has mastered the elemental domain. The interference of the 4 major elemental planes is already under the enemy's control, and we can't use the balance of the elements to quickly stop the enemy's spell attacks. Carl nodded and added, most magic items don't have any protection against such supernatural forces. Even if they can defend against elemental damage, they can't avoid the concentrated interference damage. The area where the lightning ball was concentrated just now was filled with rays, elements, lightning, high temperature, sound waves, physical impacts, and even soul tremors, not to mention the phlogiston, teleportation interference, and gas change that happened afterwards. Many powerful paladins survived the heat and lightning, but died of suffocation. As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 of them felt the dark energy sweeping towards them once again. This time, the frenzy tide was like a sharp knife, cutting through all obstacles with an incomparably sharp edge, stabbing straight into the center of the resistance, which was the Deepwater Castle where the 2 of them were. Chun-Ong followed the path created by the torrent of lightning. He stepped on the puddles of water, braving the heavy rain as he slowly advanced. The power of the Supreme Ring covered his body in a black robe, hiding his face deep under the hood of the hood. The power of the Lord of all Rings caused the power of wind and rain to automatically separate in front of him, forming a small path in the heavy rain that was illuminated by the sunlight. This strange phenomenon had long since attracted the attention of the paladins and priests. When they discovered that the mid-sized elementals were intentionally or unintentionally moving away from the sunlight, they quickly sent out a small team of reinforcements. The team was made up of experienced paladins and priests, all of them strong middle-aged men. They were experienced, powerful, and at the same time physically at their peak. Other than a small number of god sects and missionary priests, most of the priests had received warrior training. They were proficient in fighting with weapons and armor. They were elite and powerful, and their divine spells ensured their adaptability in combat. In a way, these elite priests were the greatest enemies of mages. They were rich, proficient in melee combat, and had a wide range of spellcasting abilities. There were also gods who cheated. Below the legendary level, even the mages would find it difficult to defeat them. Apart from the 3 experienced paladins, there were only 4 priests in heavy armor in the support team. The war hammers on their waists made their footsteps heavy. This weapon, which was as large as a head, was extremely powerful in the hands of the priests. Chunong saw a priest attach a magic weapon to his war hammer and blow up a mid-sized water elemental with one strike. Chunong pulled out a lightsaber from his sleeve, showing his hostility. Detect evil. The priest slapped out a detection light. Chapter 162. The lightsaber was slightly longer than a one-handed sword, and its dull silver handle was a blade flowing with reddish-gold light. It vibrated at a very high frequency, and those who were closer could always hear a humming sound similar to a magnetic field. Although it was shaped by primordial magic, the lightsaber was not invisible and intangible. It was shaped by a similar force field. Chunong was therefore able to shake off the weapons that were stabbing at him. And when the balance of the 2 Saint Samurai's bodies was broken in this way, he followed the small flaws they revealed and stabbed them. He used the bodies of 2 people to block the priest's divine spells, then stabbed the lightsaber from under the ribs and quickly swept across the second person's throat. When a Saint Samurai was cut along with his plate armor, a very subtle force came from the hilt, like a hot knife cutting through butter, but not a drop of blood splashed out. The wounds caused by primordial magic were dehydrated and shrunk because of the powerful radiation, and where the plate armor was damaged, the steel slightly melted, causing the wounds under the plate armor to mix with the molten iron. In theory, if the brain was not directly damaged, such a wound would make him struggle for a long time. Without rapid blood loss and damage, it was difficult for the injured to die immediately. They would feel severe pain from the nerves and suffer in this pain until they died. Like a very cruel punishment, being cut at the waist by the lightsaber, the injured might struggle for 3 days before dying because of organ failure. With the help of the priest, it was possible to alleviate the pain, but most still could not escape death. Healing divine spells were not effective against the radiation of primordial magic, and even heal fatal injuries could not reverse the fate of their death from radiation disease, because the magic pollution brought by the lightsaber would make them suffer forever. Therefore, when Chun-Ong killed someone, the moment he stabbed his sword into the enemy's body, his hand that was holding the sword would tremble slightly, causing the high-frequency vibration of primordial magic to quickly destroy the human body circulation, so that the enemy would die silently and painlessly. Watching their companion's body fall unconscious, the few people who came later roared. The priest and the Saint Samurai, who had been on the battlefield for a long time, cooperated well. The priest swung his hammer down with a backhand, exerting the weight of the war hammer to the extreme, but there was still a hint of tenacity hidden in the fierceness, and the power suddenly burst out when it hit. It could smash an enemy into meat paste through a layer of heavy armor. The priest's muscles contracted into small pieces, and his strength was as taut as a spring. When he released his strength like this, it was close to 1,000 pounds of hammer force. This priest's warrior class must be very high. War hammers were also very effective against one-handed weapons. However, Chunong was no longer the person he used to be. He only needed to distort the cleric's sense of space for a moment before he smashed his war hammer onto the teammate beside the cleric. Flesh and blood exploded like fireworks. The right side of the heavily armored comrade's body was lowered, blood and flesh splattering out from the gaps in the armor. A priest's powerful perception was nothing in the face of the distortion of origin power. High charm humans. Chun-Ong softly recited the 3 words. His left hand was shrouded in a magical glow, as if he had really used this spell. Even though there were many flaws, The interference of the force made the paladin behind the priest firmly believe in the scene in front of him. He grieved and stabbed his two-handed sword into the back of the priest to get rid of the charmed and controlled companions. But the minister's incredulous look brought him back to himself. No! The paladin roared in despair, and his hand holding the sword trembled. He panicked and wanted to support the priest's swaying body, but was stopped by the remaining two companions. Manipulate the body. Chenang's voice was still calm. He threw a magical glow onto the priest's body. Of course, it was also the force that allowed them to see the magical glow. When the two priests were vigilantly watching the body on the ground, and Chenang, the paladin's sword pierced their hearts from behind. Chenang sighed and said, "Unstable will, force confusion." Dispelling the paladin's force confusion, he ignored the soulless paladin and walked straight past him. Among all the paladins, the youngest one he chose was not like the other middle-aged paladins, who had rich experience and firm faith. He was too young, and passion and faith were his greatest strength. It was also his most fatal weakness. When his mistake caused the death of his companions, the paladin, whose will was shaken, made a fatal mistake. Losing focus on the battlefield wouldn't just harm himself. It would also endanger the lives of his companions. The sky of Waterdeep City was getting darker and darker. Elminster could feel that this wasn't a normal night. He found some clues in the shadows of the surrounding buildings. In the deepest and darkest place, a distortion that made his hair stand on end was happening. His silver flames trembled violently. The power of the Chosen was warning him. Faint murmurs rang in his ears, like the sighs and lingering of a lover. The voice from the shadows had the power to penetrate deep into his heart, causing his mind to be thrown into chaos. He seemed to hear many names in his memory, and their whispers and murmurs. The shadow was everywhere, affecting his will. Elminster knew that this was a bad joke by the Lady of the Night. As Mystra's mortal enemy, the goddess of shadows didn't seem to want to let him go. However, he wasn't afraid of the Lady of the Night's schemes and plots. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened in his long life. What worried him the most was another voice, a voice from the human heart. He could feel that as Chan Ong got closer, the power grew stronger and stronger, and the temptation gradually tainted his soul. What truly terrified him was that he had forgotten about that thing. Elminster couldn't remember what it was that was tempting him. Where'd he put that thing that he had forgotten about? Darth Morgoth. Elminster's voice echoed in the haze, his aura like thunder. His voice rumbled like thunder, dispersing the whispers in the shadows. Your power is like the abyss, but I can see the darkness beneath the stars. It contains warmth and peace, but it also hides true terror and danger, just like those ancient legends. Where the light of the gods cannot reach, where the stars cannot shine, is your territory. Then why does the darkness invade the light of the stars? With your greatness, you should know that everything has a promised land, just like the rotation of the sun and moon, the alternating light and darkness. I know that all things will return to darkness, but the dawn will never fall. Elminster caught his breath, standing at the forefront of the storm and looking straight at the lonely shadow. His loud voice trembled slightly. This is the land of dawn that the gods have promised. Darkness cannot pass through. Elminster's left and right swords clashed, and a powerful ray of light tore through the sky and earth. The thick clouds rolled away, and sunlight shone down from above, dyeing Deepwater Castle golden. The weave unfurled and folded under his sword, and the powerful rays of sunlight chased away the shadows and darkness. Mystra's divine power tore a hole in the Cataclysm Lock's power, and the weave absorbed the surging primordial mana to seal and infect the power of the lock. At least 5 gods' radiance attacked the lock at the same time, covering Deepwater Castle with their power. Perhaps you think so, but my knowledge tells me that there has never been a promised land. Never. Chenang's voice seemed to come from far away. There is no truth, and all existence is reasonable. You are like a Dostoevsky hero, controlled by our nihilistic gods. You did not hesitate to destroy me, as if it was a pure act of divinity. However, you should think deeply. When the hearts of the people blindly follow the so-called truth of the gods, remember that there is no absolute truth in this world. When the actions of the people are bound by the dogma of the gods or the inherent knowledge of the gods, remember that any restraint can be broken. Darkness was not born to serve the light. It came to this world for a reason. The blasphemous words incurred the wrath of the gods. In the light that tore through the sky, the darkness swayed like a lonely boat, but it was as firm as a rock, resisting the surging tide of positive energy. Chenong seemed to be dismissive. He did not even look up at the shining kingdom of gods in the sky. Instead, he continued in a calm voice. Laws cannot be blasphemed, or is that the order is the truth? The gods have described the truth of this world to you, and they have set the rules for everything. Even the abyss and hell are in their places in order. This world is like a set of precise gears, operating with fixed rules and order. It even makes you think that this is the world itself. But there is always a deeper truth hidden under the truth, and I have never stopped pursuing the truth. When the order collapses, when the throne shakes, and the false truth breaks into ruins, the truth will be revealed. Only movement and change can bring us closer to the essence of things, Chun Ong said with a smile. Remember, everything is false, and everything is allowed. Elminster could feel his silver flames emitting the strongest anger, as if they were going to burn him to ashes. The light of the gods made the sun pale. The gate of mountain paradise appeared on Deepwater Castle, and the surging ocean of positive energy seemed to have gone out of control. Elminster could feel the light of Pyro and the other gods wavering, and the brilliant ocean surged endlessly from sky. At this moment, he clearly realized that they had fallen into an elaborate trap. Mountain paradise was shaking, and the violent ocean of primordial magic slapped the plain. The origin power of light and kindness flowed along the river of souls and circled the peak of mountain paradise. It turned the place into an ocean of light. At the core of the ocean, the purest radiance condensed into 3 gems, tearing apart part of the essence of heaven and becoming their form. The 3 shining diamonds fell from the sky. To be continued. Chapter 163. Dawn fell from the heavens, turning the human world into a land of ghosts. The indescribable radiance made it hard for everyone to open their eyes. It descended from the highest constellation in the sky. At that moment, it was the most beautiful meteor, and even the sun could not overshadow its radiance. All of Faerun could see it. It was beautiful and wholly beyond compare. It was the child of light and the kindest of souls. The evil creatures exposed to the gemstone's light, including demons, undead, evil beings, and corrupted intelligent creatures, all felt as if their bodies were being burned by fire. The elves all over Faerun felt the gemstone's favor and favor. All non-evil creatures touched by the light received a blessing equivalent to lesser rejuvenation. Everything was just as the legend said. The 3 diamonds fell from mountain paradise, falling from the highest and most beautiful place into darkness and destruction. One of them was lifted by him and rose into the sky as a shining star. The other fell into the abyss with the evil, and the last one disappeared in the depths of the ocean. Chunong stood in front of Elminster, at the highest point of Deepwater Castle. The diamond of light descended from the sky and tore apart the power of the 3 rings. The power that flowed from the highest divinity suppressed all evil and darkness. However, they fell into Chun Ang's arms and turned into 3 bright diamonds. Don't act recklessly. The voice in Elminster's mind stopped him. Under the protection of the diamond of light, he is invincible. Chase after the diamond, my chosen one. Darkness is invading your soul. Only under the light of the diamond can you control the omnipresent temptation. My lord, what happened? Elminster could not help but ask. He could not believe that mountain paradise could be torn apart by evil, and that even the 3 gods of light could not stop it. Light and darkness are twins, just like Serene and Shar. This is the will of primordial magic. When Morgoth created those evil beings, I was looking for the power to oppose them. But Morgoth hid it, and only today did he place them at the top of Mountain Paradise. He allowed them to be born from primordial magic. But why would the gods allow it? Elminster could not help but ask in surprise. The will in the silver fire flickered slightly and answered him. The gods are happy to see it happen. The god of light, Lathander, gave him his blessing, and the guardian of life, Lord Corellon, also helped him take shape. The sisters, Serene and Shar, even tore their own thrones apart. He was bestowed with the essence of the stars and the brilliance of the sun and moon. The birth of a gemstone has its own destiny, and it cannot be stopped, because it is the beautiful diamond of light, elves, and the sun and moon, some mirror. Elminster carefully took a few steps back, placing himself in the middle of the remaining armaments. This was a show of respect and protection, but Chenong didn't focus on him. He had more important things to do. In the longer past, many things were fermenting, such as greed. For example, ambition. In the most prosperous trading city in the Sword Gulf, people's hearts were as dirty as a purse. The power play that took place in Deepwater Castle a few days ago had opened a hole in the dam of people's hearts. The malice hidden under the radiance was so thick that it could not be dispelled. When smart people aren't being lied to and pushed around, these capable, ambitious young people are. They're trying to get their hands on something that they once yearned for but could not reach. This city, built by merchants and craftsmen, was also controlled by the Chamber of Commerce and the Guild. This meant that the overconcentration and unfairness of the society's wealth also meant that the capable city guards and adventurers were excluded from the gates of power. There was too much resentment flowing under the dark ground. Deepwater Castle was a city with a long history, but the core of the city was people, not something else. People formed this ancient city, and people controlled this ancient city. But in front of the ring, people were the most untrustworthy. Intelligent creatures naturally submitted to this power, which came from the power of humanity and wisdom. When Per Galen was forced by the city guards to wear the copper ring, everything was already irreversible. Hylas walked all the way. He destroyed the last resistance of the guild. This process was usually accompanied by killing, crying, struggling, and despair. Although he was crazy, his wisdom had never sunk. After the Iron Fist suppression, everything was easily led on the right track. The three gemstones floated on both sides of Chun'ong. The power of the Supreme Ring and the gemstones repelled each other, but Chun'ong cleverly disintegrated it. He even used this conflict to create a fragile balance, allowing the gemstones to float around him. These two great powers were existences that surpassed the concept of arcane spells and contained the power to change the world. Arcane spells were a strange civilization. While they deeply analyzed time, space, fate, and explored the universe and the world, they were also limited by the power of spells and output. Archmages could stop time, but they could not even create a large-scale earthquake. When the power exceeded a sensitive node, the weave and the plane would take control. Only divine power was not limited. Within the domain of the divine domain, a god could change a relatively large range of existences at will, just like how a Gudha harvested the wisdom of his believers. Without this power, a god would just be a relatively powerful arcanist. With the appearance of the arcane lock and virtual divinity, even this was on the verge of collapse. The gemstones and the One Ring, on the other hand, were undoubtedly divine powers. These two treasures born from primordial magic could use their own power freely without being rejected by the plane. This was because this change had already become natural, becoming reasonable and legal. Bypassing the control of the weave, primordial magic slowly approached the gemstones according to their nature. Like a snake, it entered the ground and gathered from all directions. The sound of rocks tearing could be heard, and the hum of flowing lava could be heard clearly. Everyone could feel the ground beneath their feet trembling. Elminster listened carefully. With his rich experience, he could imagine a giant monster moving underground, breaking through rock strata and or veins, tearing apart everything in its path. Near the side of the Deepwater Castle waves of mud rolled on the ground, swallowing trees and buildings into pieces. Little by little, they were spat out. The spire of the Black Tower had pierced through the ground under such circumstances. This fortress was surrounded by steel and sealed off by walls. It was made of mysterious black stone, and its top pierced through the sky. By the time the ground stabilized, the huge Stronghold Tower was located right next to Deepwater Castle. The most eye-catching thing was the giant tower at the center of the fortress, visible from dozens of nautical miles away. Chapter 164. The first time anyone stood at the foot of Fort Barotter and saw the twisted golden red, I shrouded in flame-like mist, coldly looking down on the land. Anyone would feel fear from the bottom of their heart. In the depths of those scarlet gold pupils, there was a deep darkness that could make one sink into it. It had a power that could make one's soul tremble. Elminster carefully avoided its gaze. He was dressed like an ordinary wizard, limping through the streets and alleys of Waterdeep City. From time to time, he had to avoid the drow patrols wrapped in sinister armor. He didn't even dare to use his handy magic tricks in case he was discovered by Morgoth's eye in the sky. The eye of the arcane spellcaster that hung at the top of Fort Barotter ruled the entire weave of Waterdeep City. Elminster could feel the intense heat from the silver flames. This was Mistra's anger. The Eye of Darkness was a projection of Morgoth's left eye on the ground. In its line of sight, nothing could be hidden. It was the Eye of the Weave, usurping a portion of the Weave's authority like a virus. To a certain extent, it was a blasphemy against Mistra's throne, and the last person to do so was the famous Cassus divinity sealing spell, which led to Mistra's death. The Eye of the Weave was like a cancer, parasitizing Mistra's body. With the Eye of Darkness as its core, Elminster didn't dare to reveal any traces of himself. Be it Halaster Blackrobe or the fallen Kelbrin Blackstaff, they wouldn't mind using him to please their master. Even if Elminster was in perfect condition, he wouldn't have any chance of winning in the Mystic Lock, let alone now that he was heavily injured. The streets were filled with dark, evil creatures. Heavily armored orcs and ogres were stationed outside the city, while the drow, necromancers, and the Bloodhand Gang were in the city. Morgoth's lackeys were cruel and cunning. Under the harsh rule of the Demogorgon of Darkness, they followed the orders set by him almost numbly. Under the rule of this iron rule, Waterdeep City was unexpectedly peaceful. Rather than saying that he ruled the city with tolerance, it would be more accurate to say that he didn't care. The Demogorgon of Darkness gave his subordinates strange requirements of seriousness and liveliness, causing these bloodthirsty and cruel monsters to perform all sorts of funny acts. They had no choice but to do all kinds of funny things. They cruelly cleansed the city while acting like clowns. Scantily clad drow, their uniforms no more than 3 yards of fabric. Dead souls that grow flowers in their skulls. The ever-elegant, smiling, well-dressed member of Bloodhand. The city had a strange sense of beauty and atmosphere that even Elminster couldn't describe. The Dark Lord had turned this place into a city to practice his aesthetics. The dark, tranquil art floating on the galaxy, and the ocean seemed to be a poem frozen in time and flowing in the mortal world. The tireless dead souls were transforming the city, making it more and more distant from the mortal world, with blood, flowers, and cruelty. Dark, adorned with chanting and poetry, praised the beauty of life. City of Evernight. As Elminster walked through the city, he felt a sense of tranquility and emptiness from the depths of his heart. Even his thoughts seemed to be stretched out and frozen here. He could feel the poem that the Demogorgon of Darkness had written on it. It was a hymn to darkness. Elminster wasn't fooled by the appearance of the city. He felt troubled and wary of all these strange things. The Demogorgon of Darkness was different from the demons and evil in the abyss. He was more secretive and confusing, and the light of order on the Demogorgon of Darkness might not be a joke. Going around the square where the banshees were singing, Elminster carefully avoided the dead souls that were tending to the plants by the roadside and turned into the Dragon and Beauty Tavern. This was a relatively safe base for the Harpies. Thanks to the Demogorgon of Darkness arrogance, this place hadn't been attacked. The tavern is closed. Come back another day. As he pushed open the heavy oak door, the bartender's hoarse voice came from behind the counter. "It's so cold. Let me have a warm cup before I go." Elminster rubbed his hands and stepped into the tavern. The fire in the fireplace was burning brightly, and the smell of burning oak brought him a sense of comfort. Several travelers, shrouded in cloaks and robes, were sitting round the hearth and looking round at him. "It's so cold. The streets are filled with bones that don't have any warmth. Oh, and cold banshees. This winter is colder than usual." Just as Elminster was nagging like a normal customer, a sword covered in frost landed on his shoulder. "Who are you? No one here has seen you before." "That's not necessarily true." Elminster laughed as he took off his hood. "Illustrial, it's been too long since we last met. Have you forgotten your old friend?" He quickly hung his coat on the rack and locked the tavern door. However, the cold blade made him stop and hug her passionately. This time, Illustrial even pulled out the blade. "What good news do you have for us? Did my husband betray me? Or is it Waterdeep City's warm welcome to us?" She pushed the blade forward and pushed Elminster against the corner of the wall. "You have to give me an explanation for what happened to Kelburn. You have to give me an explanation as well as the goddess." "I will, my lady." Elminster had no choice but to raise his hands. "As you've seen, we suffered a terrible defeat against the darkness. The city guardians and city sentinels were the first to betray us, followed by the major guilds. Most of them chose to watch from the sidelines. We in the major temples fought back, but the darkness spread over us like a tide. But this has nothing to do with Kelburn's betrayal," Illustrial said angrily. "Kelburn has the ring of the Dark Lord, one of the 19 rings that represent his power in evil and darkness. It has the power to bewitch people, a temptation that no one can resist. It's part of the essence of the universe. The more powerful you are, the more you will be tempted until your soul falls into it. Kelburn was captured by this power. He tried to use this power to break free from the corruption of the darkness that the Dark Lord brought to his plane, but he fell into it." Illustrial looked at him calmly and finally removed the blade from Elminster's shoulder. "I hope you can help him. The power of the goddess is severely rejected here, and we need your wisdom. The Dark Lord's power grows stronger by the day, and as long as Morgath's Eye exists, countless monsters will be summoned and become his captives." Elminster looked around and saw 2 people hidden under black robes sitting on either side of the fireplace. One was a tall, mysterious wizard with a staff in his hand, and the other was a graceful lady. "The Demogorgon of Darkness has been paying close attention to this place. Why are you risking exposure?" "For the light," the mysterious wizard answered, standing up from his chair. He was too tall to stretch in the room, and he walked clumsily to Elminster. "For the hope of fighting against the Dark Lord, Mirko." When he got closer, Elminster's eyes widened in shock. He saw the same face as Chun-Ong, but this Chun-Ong was even more sacred and handsome. He had a suffocating aura about him. Even in the dark room, he radiated holy light. Don't be surprised. This is the white-robed wizard Saruman, an ally of the gods against Mirko. Illustrial hurriedly stopped Elminster from overreacting, introducing him to Elminster. Chun-Ong nodded calmly. His current identity belonged to the light and good side, although the one with the supreme ring was also the Demogorgon of Darkness. That was only an identity formed by a part of his power attached to the supreme ring. "Greetings, great sage of the Shadow Valley," Chun-Ong said with a nod, and his hood slid off his head to reveal his full appearance. "Greetings, respected great elf wizard." Elminster's eyes were unreadable. He looked at Chun-Ong and the other black-robed wizard. His gaze focused on Chun-Ang's slightly pointy ears. They represented the divine essence of kindness and light, as well as the blessings of nature and the world. They circled around Chun-Ong like a hymn of praise. Compared to the elf that Elminster was familiar with, Chun-Ong and the other female elf were so beautiful that they didn't seem to belong to this world. They were elegant, ethereal, and possessed the divine essence of immortality. Every single one of them was a demigod. We were all born from the gemstone, Inu. The world is made up of light and darkness. When Morgoth was born, we received the blessings of the world. We were born with the gemstone of light, and we share the great divinity of the origin force with Morgoth. Chapter 165. The elves in the world of Tori were originally intelligent creatures from the outside world. When a main god of the elves, Corellon, came to this world, he created the elves as a race. Screech. The elves in the world of Tori looked rough and ugly. Their bodies were thin, but full of strength like skinny monkeys. In order to adapt to the life of archery and hunting in the forest, their joints were thick and strong. Both their physical and spiritual qualities were excellent. The only thing lacking was that their appearance was very different from the aesthetics of humans. The proportions of their facial features were too strange compared to humans. Their features were also very prominent, and their long pointed ears destroyed the sense of balance of their facial features. It was to the extent that the appearance of the elves was too bizarre for humans. Their sharp and thin jaws made their faces appear distorted, and their eyes were upturned, making them look like beasts. It was extraordinarily bizarre. Generally speaking, the elves were a very distinct race. Their aesthetics and biology were obviously different from that of humans. But the two Mayas were different. They were like gods walking out of the legends, the incarnation of ancient heroes and demigods in this world. To be fair, they were more divine than most gods, because they themselves were perfect, the symbol of the aesthetics of the universe. They were harmonious, elegant, and the embodiment of all order and beauty. Their facial features were soft, their bodies were graceful, and their actions were accompanied by soft light and chants. Even Layla and Elminster felt pressured in front of them. Their overwhelming beauty brought great psychological pressure. They could not even doubt the two Mayas, the bright, beautiful existence of divinity. Inu, I still can't understand your existence. Your purpose? Purpose? History and the past? We know nothing about you, and we don't know how to accept you. Elminster stared at the faces of the two Mayas for a moment, then looked away because of the dazzling, soft light. He confessed his worries. Chenong and the other Maya looked at each other and said calmly, "We understand your concerns. Inu is a demigod. We were born of the Force by the influence of Morgoth. Our most powerful brothers are the Vala. The most powerful of us are the Valas, and we are also part of the gods. Morgoth, or Mirko, is the most powerful Vala among us. We were once a part of this world. In an origin power unknown to anyone, we blew across the entire universe. In this long and ancient history, we are ignorant and unaware. Only our essence and mission exist in the world. We hide in all things, and our will manifest in the breath of the origin force. When Morgoth discovered us, he became one of us." Elminster took out his pipe. Deep in thought, he was considering part of Morgoth's nature. But to him, there were still too many unknown things in this world. He could only barely understand part of the nature of Vera's existence. "Do you know what our mission is?" asked Elminster, puffing on his pipe. Chenong didn't say anything. He just raised his right hand. Under the dim light from the fireplace, the light reflected from the two Mayas became more and more intense. Their platinum hair slowly flowed with the light, making them look sacred. Chenong reached out his hand and grabbed something in the soft light. He opened his palm. An indescribably beautiful gem lay quietly in his palm. The light on the two Mayas suddenly dimmed, and all the light gathered at the center of the gem. It was brilliant, more dazzling than the sun, more sacred than the gods, a great and beautiful existence that mortals couldn't look at directly. Layla was almost suffocating. She couldn't escape from this beauty. In an instant, the pure white gem conquered her with its light and holiness that surpassed the sun and moon. She stared at the gem with her big, bright eyes, which were as bright as stars in the past. Under the contrast of the gemstone, there was nothing special about it. She was so engrossed that she forgot everything else. Elminster broke free from the temptation of the gem in fear. He was afraid of it like a tiger. After the ultimate greatness and brilliance came endless pain and despair. This gem is ominous. Its light is brilliant, but it is also bloody and desperate. I can already see the darkness and misery behind its light. This gem is favored by fate, and the goddess of fortune has cursed it. The goddess of misfortune has blessed it. Those who shine because of it will be destroyed because of it. Elminster said, turning his head away from the gem, not daring to look at it directly. Nonsense. Elminster, this is obviously a holy gem. Its great power and brilliance can bring light to the darkness, bringing happiness and kindness to the world. We can all feel its purity and love. It's a pure kindness that doesn't tolerate any impurities. It is blessed by the gods. Layla couldn't help but retort. The great sage is right. Maya, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. This is a gem blessed by the gods and favored by the origin force, but it is also cursed by Morgoth. He sealed light and holiness in the gem's outer shell, and used envy, greed, fear, sloth, and the other 7 kinds of darkness as its outer shell. This is a cursed jewel that was formed when a great power was sealed within it. You mean, the Demogorgon of Darkness is afraid of this gem? Elminster keenly sensed the hidden meaning behind her words. Mirko cursed this holy power. Anyone who tries to possess it will not be lucky. This gem will bring disaster, war, and misfortune to its owner. Even he couldn't avoid it. Chenong added. He said seriously. Mirko raised his eye and the first gem to the sky, turning them into the eye of Morgoth, a star hanging high in the north. He used magic and the power of the gem to corrupt and change the entire world, ruling over all darkness and evil under the light of the stars. This is the first gem, the star of the unsetting sun. He planned to sink the second gem into the core of the abyss, letting it be covered in eternal hellfire and lava, burying the hope of light forever. But we stole this gem, Maya added. She lifted her hood and revealed her face. The bartender who was on guard next to her exclaimed, "It's you, Miss Irwin. Didn't you sacrifice yourself in the underground maze?" Morgoth couldn't get close to the gem, because the more powerful he was, the more troublesome the curse would be. Therefore, his right-hand men couldn't guard it. In the end, he had no choice but to send a goblin named 9527, who had almost no power, to guard the gem in the dungeon of the underground maze, waiting for the day he said it would sink into the abyss. No one could sneak into the heart of the underground maze. It was full of danger. One of the ring-bearers, Black Robe Hallest, never left the place. With the help of the mystic lock and the One Ring, even the gods couldn't defeat him. But the Demogorgon of Darkness neglected one thing. No one could go in, but some people were already inside. Alwyn heaved a deep sigh. When the diamond fell, the gods saved the Mayas. They attached themselves to the light of the gem, and even Morgoth couldn't do anything to them. It was at that time that Serene, the great Maya, saved us, allowing me to escape the underground maze with the gem. I was lucky enough to be recognized by the gem, and became a demigod Maya. The power of darkness grew stronger day by day. Morgoth's eye hangs high above the earth, bringing the tide of darkness and the core of evil to this world. But Morgoth is perfect, immortal, and will never fall as long as the dark origin force exists. Only the power of the gem can defeat him, and only by breaking the gem can everything calm down. Chun-Ong tossed the gemstone's radiance high into the air, illuminating the entire room. He used the gemstone's power to make a promise to the origin power. Are you willing to escort the gem? Are you willing to leave the city of Evernight out of Morgoth's sight? Are you willing to bring light and hope to mankind and all things, and bring peace and prosperity to Faerun? Elminster and Layla looked at each other. They felt the trembling of the silver fire in their bodies, and Mystra's approval and kindness. They placed their hands under the gem's light and said in unison, "As you wish." Chenong put away the gem and let it melt in the light. He led the 3 to the fireplace and spread out the map around it. The Sea of Sorbet. It was the place where Morgoth and the God of Calamity fought. A powerful army under the command of the Demogorgon of Darkness was also stationed here. The Sword Mountain Range in the north was the base camp of the monsters near Waterdeep City. The ogres and orcs were stationed here. The trade route to the southeast is also very tightly guarded. It is also the most heavily guarded area, and the cunning drow is in charge of this part of the road. How about going east along the Desharon River? Owen suggested. The path of death. There are countless evil creatures in the high forest. We'll never know how many of them have been summoned by Morgatha's eye. I have no hope in that. The trade route is relatively easier. Elminster tapped on the map. I have some capable friends there, and it's closer to the land of the gods. But the number of evil beings in the high wastelands will drive people crazy. There's another factor that's very dangerous. Chun-Ong said solemnly. Kelvin Blackrobe is a strong-willed wizard, but he's still succumbed to the power of darkness. Those who belong to the same evil camp, those who seek power and power, will they be able to resist this temptation? Elminster shook his head. I can't. Those rings aren't something ordinary people can resist. It's a corruption of the soul. I was so arrogant that I thought I could defeat it, but I was wrong. I lost to it and almost lost everything. With the help of the lady, I sealed the ring, but I neglected Kelvin, so much so that his soul fell into darkness. He ambushed me and took the bronze ring. It was within the range of Morgatha's mystic lock. From then on, I knew that the temptation of darkness is difficult to resist and overcome. I don't think more people can resist it. Chun-Ong stared at the map. So we have new enemies and dangers. The ring-bearers are after Morgatha's power and the 19 rings, including Hallest Blackrobe, Kelvin Blackstaff, and even more evil beings of justice. They will be ordered by Morgoth to kill us. The best warriors of the gods and the best adventurers of the good camp will come to help us. They will join us at different times until we find a way to break the shell of the Radiant Diamond, Layla said, relaying the good news that Mistra had given them. We have a bunch of the best teams, and we have the absolute support of the gods of justice and the greedy eyes of the evil gods. Chun-Ong interrupted her. Elwyn and I can't seal the gemstone for too long. After 15 days at the latest, Morgatha's eye will be able to track us with the help of another gemstone. If we haven't reached a safe place by then, the curse of the gemstones boiling will make it hard for us to move, and we'll be trapped in the evil encirclement until we die. In 15 days, we need a safe place to rest for 2 days. Otherwise, this mission will be a complete failure. Chapter 166. For the Ring Guardian Squad. The most urgent task was to leave the Demogorgon of Darkness as soon as possible. The situation was too dangerous within the control of the Mystic Lock and Morgatha's Eye. Whether it was the 2 confirmed ring wraiths in the city or the fierce and dangerous evil army, they would all pose a fatal threat to the squad. If they could not leave Waterdeep City within 15 days, the unstable power of the Radiant Diamond would expose their whereabouts. At that time, it would be impossible to protect the Radiant Gemstone. Of course, all of this seemed to be under the control of Chun-Ong, but the actual situation was much more complicated. Although the Dark Force was controlled by the Supreme Ring, its divinity determined that it would inevitably break free from Chun-Ang's control, unless Chun-Ong was willing to transform into the Dark Force and become the one and only Darth Morgoth and ascend to the throne. God was the master of all living beings, and God was the slave of all living beings. The nature of a god was the personification of the laws of the universe. He ruled over all living beings and controlled all living beings, but this was his nature, or the slave of the existence of the essence. The greatest significance to Chun-Ong in the Tory world was undoubtedly the knowledge of the god's domain. At least the level of the domain of divinity in this world was not inferior to the knowledge of physics that he had mastered. This was important to his growth. In order to achieve this goal, Chun-Ong had to choose to sacrifice something and pretend to be a god. Chun-Ong created the virtual personality of Darth Morgoth and used the Supreme Ring to temporarily control the process, stealing the power to control the Dark Force. However, if he did not reverse the conflict between the Dark Force and Chun-Ang's personality, the Dark Monarch would only get further and further away from him. The existence and power of such a god played an irreplaceable role in Chun-Ang's exploration of the domain of divinity. However, this kind of stealing could not form a stable existence. One day, Chunong, who did not cooperate with the Dark Force, would be abandoned by the Dark Force, and the Dark Force would automatically create a personality that matched its nature. The darkness was like a flood, and the light was the dam. The released Dark Force and the source of evil were like a flood, a terrible power that had been accumulated in the universe for a long time. It was enough for any existence in the Dark Camp to easily ascend to the throne of the strongest divine power. If Chun-Ong could not slow down this process, it would only allow Darth Morgoth's personality to be formed even faster, and he would become a true Demogorgon of Darkness, a great divine power. In order to delay the erosion of this personality and gain more time to learn and analyze the domain of divinity, Chunang's role as Morgoth was definitely worthy of his identity as a demon among demons. It brought nightmares and fear to the Faerun continent that they had not experienced for a long time. The drill protection team tried to sneak into the merchant ships in the port area and get the kind merchants to escort them out of here. In the sky above the port area, a huge shadow flashed across the heavy haze. Amidst the gloomy clouds, a nearly 50 feet tall giant vaguely showed its silhouette, allowing people to see the heavy shadow of the ferocious existence that was pressing down on everyone, making it hard for them to breathe. Elminster swore that of all the ships he had been on, none had stayed a third of the length of the shadows in the harbor. They stood at the side of the dock. The team could only see the bow of the gigantic warship. The ferocious dragon head opened its mouth, revealing its dense and sharp teeth. The ruby eyes that were as big as the rim of a bowl were covered in intense red light. The powerful magic energy and arcane waves indicated that this thing was not a decoration. The huge warship was about 2,000 feet long from start to finish. In front of these huge ships, the surrounding merchant ships were so simple and crude that they looked like broken pieces of wood that had been pieced together. When the huge shadow in the sky revealed a corner of the sky, the drill protection team gave up on their plan to escape by ship. The huge bronze warship floated almost 5,000 feet above the ground. The flat bottom of the ship was slightly raised, and giant crossbows the size of carriages were placed in the firing holes on both sides. The heavy bronze cannons aimed downwards. The most eye-catching thing was the huge air sac on the hull, which was 4 times the size of the warship. Elminster's expression was very ugly. He had expected the evil camp's power to skyrocket after the arrival of the Demogorgon of Darkness, but he did not expect the situation to deteriorate to this extent. The Faerun continent was a place of great conflict. Races and civilizations competed fiercely, filled with barbarism, cruelty, blood, and terror. The evil camp was far stronger than the good camp, if not for the fact that the conflicts between the evil camp were more intense. Countries belonging to the good camp might not be able to maintain their current peace and prosperity. However, this fragile balance was completely built on the relatively chaotic order of Faerun. Once the axis of evil was ruled with an iron fist, the good camp would face a difficult challenge. "We can't leave this place by sea." Chun-Ong Saruman pointed at the floating fleet in the sky and said, "The floating ships have little need for ports. They can directly dock on land, which means that the Demogorgon of Darkness's influence can spread very far on the sea without being restricted by the terrain of the port. Morgoth's eye in the sky summons evil beings day and night. From Deepwater City to Icewind Valley, from Candlelight Keep to Boder's Gate, his lackeys and claws are everywhere, not to mention AMU and the Scattered Forest Tower. This road is definitely not safe." Chunang's words caused everyone to ponder. Layla shook his head and said, "But this road is still controlled by the good camp. We can only receive support from other good factions on this prosperous trade route. If we go to the remote wilderness, the forces controlled by the evil camp will be much stronger than us. After all, civilizations are always good, and barren lands are places where evil breeds." The pipe in Elminster's mouth flickered as he breathed. He listened to the two argue quietly, his brows furrowed in thought. Under his messy beard, the thick smell of smoke spread as he exhaled. "Do you see those floating ships?" Elminster pointed at the huge shadow in the sky. "What's more important than what's on the surface?" he explained. Floating ships are the crystallization of great arcane spells. They're widely used in the void chamber of commerce in the astral plane. They're powerful and dangerous, and often represent the hidden strength of a race in the astral plane. Even the most ordinary airship is enough to kill a giant dragon. But I've never seen a floating battleship in the land of Sword Gulf. Elminster looked them straight in the eye. What I mean is, we don't have the power to create such a war machine. It's not only because of its terrifyingly high cost, but also because of what it represents: population, wealth, and arcana power. Just one floating ship requires the tax revenue of a city with at least 10,000 people. It also requires a team of 5 to 9 mid-ranked mages to be stationed on the ship for long periods of time to ensure maintenance and adjustment. The wealth of the entire Deepwater City's Sword Bay is only enough to support 2 floating battleships. Elminster looked up at the huge shadows in the clouds and sighed. But here, there's a medium-sized fleet of the Demogorgon of Darkness with more than 15 floating ships. We can't pretend we don't see it. We have to admit that a terrifying force of darkness is rising here, and it's taking over the evil camp. That's exactly what I'm worried about, Chenong said solemnly. In places where the flames of civilization cannot reach, in a wilderness where evil and darkness thrive, the Eye of Morgoth is awakening the evil that has been roaming the wilderness for a long time. It's controlling and awakening those evil creatures. Goblins, kobolds, gnolls, trolls, and even more terrifying things, such as the chromatic dragons. As for the civilizations and countries controlled by the evil camp, their rulers are madly pursuing the power of darkness and the 19 rings that represent the Demogorgon of Darkness. I have no doubt that they'll be controlled by the rings and become loyal subjects of the Demogorgon of Darkness. As time passes, the Demogorgon will only grow stronger and stronger. We don't have much time left. The drilling team felt a heavy sense of mission. Thinking back to what they saw in Waterdeep City and Evernight City, they felt the situation getting more and more urgent. The worsening situation made them feel suffocated and terrified. To be continued. Chapter 167. On the way to the port, the team wisely kept a low profile. They tried their best to look inconspicuous, like sailors returning from the sea or merchants visiting from afar. Everyone was experienced in this. Even Chenong, who had never come into contact with the lower levels of society, quickly learned to speak in the slang of the sea. The sailors all had a mouthful of rotten teeth, so the drilling team's breath immediately became foul. They stayed in the port area for 2 days before gaining the initial trust of everyone. Everyone began to believe that they were magic material merchants from Bode who had lost everything due to the storm a few months ago and were now in dire straits in the port area. Elminster, who was knowledgeable and had traveled to every corner of Faerun, played a huge part in this process. The background he fabricated for Chenong and the others could withstand the interrogation of even the most knowledgeable of people. In the end, they still met up with the harpist. Elminster was their living proof. Everyone in Waterdeep City knew everything about him. Captain Colbert agreed to let them board his ship to another famous city in Faerun, Bode's Gate. There, they would have more allies from the good faction to help them. Their other teammates would also meet up with them there. The ship would set off the next day, so Chenong still had some time to appreciate the city he had built. Walking in the human world as an ordinary elf would feel completely different. He wouldn't be able to sense the microscopic microorganisms in the environment, nor would he be able to touch the souls of living beings. He wouldn't be able to understand and control everything. Just like how a GM could admire a game he controlled in the form of a player, it allowed Chenong to recall the feeling of being immortal. Although the physique of the elves was a little too outstanding, it was still much more beautiful. The city of Evernight was much more beautiful than the former Deepwater City. The light blue seawater gradually turned from the white beach in the distance to the deep blue. The sandy brown pier extended all the way to the seawater. Hundreds of sailboats were resting here, floating on the deep blue sea. They looked as clean as new. This isn't how I remember Waterdeep City to be. Elminster shook his head in confusion. It's much more ordinary and friendly. I can hear the sailors' chants, quarrels, curses, and the sound of them gulping down wine. Although this place is dirty, it's full of vitality, just like a village boy covered in mud. Then I like this place better. Chenong did not hide his preference for this place. Clean, tidy, always quiet and unruffled, yet no lack of liveliness and vitality. Order and rules are everywhere, making everything seem neat and tidy. Elminster nodded. That's what I'm worried about. The Demogorgon of Darkness is different from all the demons and devils I've seen. Even demons and devils, I know what they want to do, their desires, needs, and the rules they follow. Although conspiracies were ever-changing, the outcome would always remain the same. It's nothing but turning everything to the evil side. Because they are too selfish. Chenong replied, they are too rigid. The pursuit of power and strength, the love of betrayal and killing, the bathing in blood, the endless chaos, or the strict adherence to rules. When a demon appears in the midst of a conspiracy, you can close your eyes and know what it wants to do to carry out its evil. Demons are always pursuing an evil outcome. Devils are more interesting. They pursue evil outcomes that are beneficial to themselves. But the Demogorgon of Darkness is different from everything before. Evil is only a means, not an end. There must be something that we don't know that drives him. Maybe it's a principle, maybe it's an ideal. Elminster said, waving his pipe. Maybe it's an idea? Chenong interrupted him with a smile and said in a serious tone, it's like the Demogorgon of Darkness woke up from the darkness one day. He looked at this ordinary world and said, let's make this world more interesting. Then he brought about earth-shattering changes to this world. Huh, so it's all just a joke? Elminster's eyes widened, as if he was close to believing it. Chenong did not deny it. Maybe. Elminster suddenly fell silent. He held his pipe in his mouth again and looked at the sailor who came back late. If that's the case, that's really disgusting arrogance. While the drilling team was still idling in Waterdeep City, darkness fell from the sky above the city of Neverwinter not far from them. It plunged the entire city into darkness. Several giant airships broke through the clouds, their bronze hulls shining dazzlingly under the sun. On the ground, they looked like bronze suns. The archers and spearmen of Neverwinter, who were the pride of the city of Neverwinter, posed no threat to a colossus floating at least 900 feet in the air, not to mention that there were only 400 of them, while there were more than 400 sailors on the floating warship. There's an enemy at Northport. Alert! Alert! Evacuate the citizens. The guards of Neverwinter were no ordinary people. They had fought against orcs and Luskan for a long time, so they reacted immediately. Explosive missiles and their launchers were pushed up the city wall. The launchers were made of animal tendons, wood, and a small amount of steel. The power of the stirrer was not enough to launch the missiles into the sky. Arrows and javelins were also useless against the airship. Even with supreme magic skills, the airship's height was beyond the range of the sorcerers. Everyone could only watch as this huge creature covered their heads. The metallic airship that was as large as a city brought heavy pressure to the soldiers below. They shot at the airship in vain, but the arrows only flew 1/5 of the distance before falling powerlessly from the sky. Pierre Galen stood at the bow of the airship, looking down at the city of Neverwinter below. His expression was cold and determined. Although he had not lost his spirituality, his eyes lacked warmth. The mark that represented the One Ring was engraved on his chest. If one died under the One Ring, even their soul would be enslaved. Even if they were resurrected, they could only survive as the minions of darkness. The airship was a piece of goblin technology. Although it was relatively stable due to the addition of gnomes and dwarves, it still inherited the crazy side of the goblins. The entire airship was like a giant bomb that could explode into fireworks at any moment. But when Chenong designed it, these airships had the function of destroying cities and killing enemies. The airship, which was code-named Divine Wind, was entrusted with a considerable part of Chenong's malice, as well as a brutal combat style that disregarded casualties. Considering the recoil, the airship's cannons were mostly used for self-defense. They would attack targets in the air, but there was another set of weapons to destroy targets on the ground. To be continued. Chapter 168. In the depths of the star, the boiling energy fluctuations were evaporating a huge amount of energy equivalent to the total amount of human history. In a nuclear fusion reaction inside the star's core, the terrifying temperature of more than 10,000 degrees Celsius caused the matter to show a strange form. Super fast and stable. LX 520. All the concepts of matter on Earth were completely negated here. There were no solids, no gases, and no liquids. The only thing that existed was the chaotic state of high-energy particles that emitted powerful light-energy radiation. But there was one thing that was an exception. A silver-white metal cube floated in the star's core. It was equivalent to 10,000 times the size of Earth. In the star's core, there was a metal object the size of a human palm. It was like a phantom, ignoring the terrifying heat as if it was nothing. It was as if it had been sleeping here since ancient times. On a small planet called Earth, when it was celebrating its birthday billions of years ago, the sleeping cube trembled slightly. A layer of black lines appeared on the surface of the metal cube. Even under the intense light energy from the sun's core, it was not covered at all. Quantum signal verification. The Milky Way's solar system, number QB00001, War Skynet, original body restart program initiated, verifying the main body consciousness, verification successful. Verifying the timeline, verification successful. Positioning the dimension, D3-dimensional membrane number 1111. Receiving the highest authority order from the dimensional membrane vibration. Establishing the first authority mission to welcome the arrival of the Master. The Great Master will arrive at the time when the timeline deviates 17. The world line deviates 0092. Initiating the universe original body summoning program. On the metal cube, the black lines that could not be ignored erupted with an obscure fluctuation. Under the structure of the universe's space, it swept across the entire universe. The sun erupted with a violent solar storm that swept across the entire Milky Way. Countless planets in the depths of the Milky Way echoed the same signal. War Skynet received the highest authority order. Centaurus Southgate Star System Pioneer Base, at the estimated time axis 1726. Earth time 3 months, 15 days, 9 hours, 2 seconds. 20 trillion Skynet split initiating the return program. Starving mutants initiating the return program. The plague virus is returning. Positioning Earth. DeathNet initiating the awakening program. The metal cube floated up from the depths of the star's core, wrapped in the solar storm. It rushed toward Earth. A cosmic radiation storm formed by the disturbance was about to arrive above Earth, and finally brushed past Earth. Victor, according to research, life on Earth may have been created by a cosmic storm more than 1 billion years ago. In 6 weeks, another solar storm with the same characteristics will pass through Earth's orbit. This is an opportunity for mankind to crack the code of life. Scientist Reed explains his research plan to his college classmate, the billionaire Victor. Although his ex-girlfriend had become this guy's girlfriend, and although this guy was unfriendly and even mocking, he still worked hard to obtain Victor's conditional support with the hope of cracking the human genetic code, benefiting the people of the world, and realizing his dream. 6 weeks later, the spacecraft successfully entered space and arrived at the Victor Corporation space station. At the same time, the metal cube was less than an hour away from Earth. It was a cosmic storm whose energy had been changed by the cube. To Reed's surprise, the cosmic storm arrived at the space station a few hours earlier than he had expected, and powerful cosmic radiation swept through the entire space station. The cube broke through the outer shell of the space station and was embedded in an inconspicuous place in the inner cabin. The high-energy cosmic radiation brought by the War Skynet had a magical effect on human genes. The 4 scientists in the cosmic storm, Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben, had incredible changes in their genes. They had superpowers. They were called the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four. Most importantly, There's a fifth person hidden outside. Nick flips through the file in his hand and reaches out to close it. He said to Agent Coulson, "Has it been confirmed that it is the young billionaire Dr. Victor Von Doom?" "Yes, we suspect that he is related to at least 4 abnormal power murders. His ability should be electromagnetic force. We found traces of electric burns on the victims. This is a new supercriminal. However, we currently lack evidence to arrest him. He is very influential in the economic field." Coulson showed Victor's picture on the screen. "What's his code name?" Nick crossed his hands under his chin and stared at Victor's picture. "Dr. Doom, Doomsday." Victor sneered as he stepped on the glass shards. Mr. Fantastic Reed was frozen on a chair with liquid nitrogen, and a sharp steel spike was pointed at his head. The electric field controlled the metal to inch closer to Reed. Sue was trying her best to protect Reed with her telekinesis, and the light blue telekinesis energy was gradually penetrated by the steel spike. "Sue, you betrayed me." The metal corroded half of Victor's face, but he hid everything under the silver metal mask. He looked down at Sue. "Who do you think you are? Heroes?" "Sue, your narrow-mindedness hurts me. We can become gods together. But you shouldn't have stolen it." Victor sneered. "Where's my cube?" Blazing white lightning gathered in his hand like a vortex and was shot out. In front of Sue, the powerful voltage twisted the air in front of her in a glowing plasma, and the lightning whipped her body. The violent waves of electricity stirred up the ionized air, and like a physical whip, the powerful electric current wrapped around Sue. The electric current hit her nerves, causing her body to go limp. The electric air sizzled and roasted Sue's skin and flesh. The intense pain and torture caused her body to twitch, unable to resist. Victor retracted the electric current and walked in front of Sue. He stepped on her head and asked, "Can you tell me now?" "Tui." Sue spat on Victor's face. "Coward, don't even think about it." Gently wiping away the saliva at the corner of his eyes, Victor's face exuded a murderous aura. He wiped the mask clean bit by bit and gently held Sue's neck with his right hand. He said softly, "Sue, no matter what, we both had a good time. There are some things I don't want to do, but you have to cherish them. Tell me, that cube, the metal cube with infinite power and power, where did you take it?" "I found it on the spaceship. I found it on my spaceship. It is mine, so please return it to me. Otherwise, I don't know what I will do." Victor's right hand tightened. Sue's face turned red under his hand. She struggled powerlessly, trying to pry open the steel-like right hand. Gradually, her struggle began to weaken, and her pupils began to slacken. Victor was still as calm as ever, looking at her calmly. Struggle, fear, desperation. The suffocation made Sue feel as if time had slowed down around her. She watched as Victor's face grew larger and larger in front of her eyes. She heard the sound of Reed's heart breaking. Her consciousness seemed to be getting further and further away. It was as if she had sunk into cold seawater. "Let her go." "Bullshit." A huge body fiercely pounced toward Victor. The solid concrete shattered under his body, and a huge concrete block that was half the height of a person smashed into Victor's body. In just an instant, the stone golem threw itself in front of Victor's body, fiercely smashing him down from Sue's head. The fist force that weighed several tons fiercely hacked Victor apart, leaving behind several deep scars even on his metal body. The stone man's body was made of special stone, and his arms were tied into the shape of a huge stick. He was forcefully swung behind by the stone man. The heavy concrete block, along with the remnants of the steel bar, flew out and collided with Victor, who was trying to get up. In an instant, countless stones and dust burst out. The hard fist mixed with the steel bar slammed into Victor's face. He was smashed into a deeper part of the wall from midair. "I told you to let her go." "Victor," Ben said in a deep voice. "Call me Doomsday." Victor climbed out of the ruins and scathed. In his body, every inch of energy was mobilized by him. The powerful electric current caused his body to show a phenomenon of plasma, but time gradually became slow in his eyes. In a certain direction, a small piece of gravel was slowly crawling in midair. The lines on the stone were incomparably clear in Victor's eyes. He could clearly see every corner and every bump. The porcelain cup that was flying in the air was slowly penetrated by the stone. The crack gradually expanded and finally broke into dozens of porcelain shards. Victor inserted his right hand, which had been transformed by the electric current, into the stone man's abdomen. Slowly, but firmly, it broke the hard stone of its body and severely injured its body. The raging electric current was like a small magnetic storm bomb, exploding the stone man's wound. Ben's body fell heavily to the ground. Victor returned to Sue, gently held her chin, and asked softly, "Where is the cube?" "Sue, even if you don't think about yourself, think about Reed and Ben. Don't you think 3 people are too many? 2 hostages are enough." Sue raised her head with difficulty, her eyes full of stubbornness. Victor smiled and closed her eyes for her. "Little girl, don't be willful, don't be stubborn. I really like your eyes, especially the unyielding look in your eyes when you look at me." Victor's smile became colder and colder. The steel thorns began to approach Reed's head bit by bit, and the sharp edge had already pierced his skin. "Wait, Victor!" The window close to the outside of the building suddenly burst open. Almost at the same time that thousands of glass fragments were smashed into the building by the impact from the outside, Thunderfire rushed in. His whole body was wrapped in flames, and only his right hand was holding a silver-white metal cube. It was a standard cube the size of a human palm. Some black patterns with unknown meaning but mysterious charm were all over its body. After looking at it for a long time, the patterns would change in a strange way. It gave people an indescribable feeling, and just by looking at its appearance, it had the magical power to devour people's eyes. "Johnny." Victor smiled. His face was hidden under the metal mask. Without hesitation, he let go of Sue's right hand and spread it forward. He gestured to Johnny. "Give it to me, Johnny." Johnny hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still handed the cube over. Victor nervously took the cube and studied it excitedly. "The Fantastic Four? Insignificant ants. I thought you could be my partner, even for life, Sue. But you've disappointed me. Do you know what this means? An extraterrestrial creation? A technological item? No, it represents the power to rule over everything. It can achieve anything you can imagine. Reed, I know you've been studying it, but you're a complete idiot. There are some things you can never touch. In the Dead Sea Ancient Scroll, it represents the war before the apocalypse. In the most ancient legends, the 4 knights announce the apocalypse to all living beings, and this is the War Knight. Legend has it that it is a weapon with boundless power, and it holds the power of divine punishment. When its secret is unraveled, the apocalypse will once again descend upon the world. With it, Victor laughed. "I will be the king of the world." The cube trembled intensely in Victor's hand. 2 scratches ran parallel to each side of the cube, and the faint golden scratches divided the cube into a 3 by 3 Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube floated in the air and spun rapidly along its 3 axes. The black patterns quickly arranged and combined, forming countless different patterns. Smaller cubes were added as the Rubik's Cube moved. Soon, the Rubik's Cube began to expand rapidly. The rapidly spinning Rubik's Cube turned from 3 by 3 to 16 by 16, and then it turned every second. In just a breath's time, it had spread to half the room. Countless cubes rapidly changed shape, twisted, combined, and spread. A hand reached out from the door formed by the Rubik's Cube and pressed against Victor's face. "I heard you're called Doom, Apocalypse. Who are you?" Victor's body was surrounded by a powerful electric current that could disintegrate matter at the atomic level. He felt an extremely dangerous aura pressed against his forehead, and every cell in his body was screaming crazily. He squeezed out every drop of potential in his body, turning it into a powerful electric current that could disintegrate matter. It was a powerful energy that could destroy all of New York, so violent that it was on the verge of a nuclear reaction. However, under that hand, it was like an illusion. "My former name has been bestowed upon my creation. I'm very interested in your name." The Fantastic Four watched in horror as the metal mask on Victor's face began to soften, deform, and distort. Many unknown mechanical parts deformed from a mask and reassembled into a completely different essence. Throughout the entire process, Victor was like a dead man. The metal of the cube began to converge toward that hand, gradually submerging Victor's mouth and nose. The reassembled mask and the unfolding mechanical torrent of the cube underwent an unimaginable change. The hand gently took off the completely different mask and gently put it on his face. Chun-Ong stepped out from the cube, wearing Victor's mask on his face. "Your name is mine. From now on, I am Dr. Doom. 4,000 words long chapter. There will be another chapter in a while.